My name's Ian. I'm 29, and until about 4 months ago, I thought I understood what family meant. I grew up believing in the kind of household where you stick together no matter what, where blood is thicker than water and all that. But apparently, that only applies when you're the daughter who makes mistakes, not the son who quietly keeps his head down and tries to survive. My sister Clara is 27, 2 years younger, but she's always been the golden child. She could set the living room on fire, and my parents would find a way to blame the lighter. I was the quieter one, the bookworm, the old soul who didn't ask for much. Clara? She asked for everything. And somehow, she always got it. About a year ago, Clara made what she described as a small business investment. What it actually was. She followed her sketchy boyfriend into some dropshipping crypto-adjacent scam that bled her dry in 5 months. She lost her apartment, tanked her credit score, and racked up nearly $40,000 in debt. Naturally, my parents came running. They emptied their emergency savings, even dipped into their retirement fund, and proudly told everyone they were giving her a second chance. They called it love. They called it what any parent would do. That was in March. In May, I got sick. Really sick. I'd been putting off a lingering stomach issue for months because I didn't have great insurance, and I figured I was just being dramatic. But one night, I passed out in my bathroom. I woke up in the ER, hooked up to N4. The doctor said if I'd waited another week, I might have died from a ruptured ulcer and a spreading infection. I needed surgery, nothing experimental, nothing cosmetic. Just a basic laparoscopic procedure to remove part of my stomach lining and keep me alive. The cost? Around $12,600 after insurance. Not small, but not outrageous. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, weak and trembling, trying to explain everything to my parents. My hands were still shaking from the medication, and I was swallowing every ounce of pride just to ask them for help. I wasn't even asking for the full amount, just enough to cover what I couldn't. Dad barely looked up from his coffee. He just shook his head like he was disappointed in me. "You should have been taking better care of yourself," he muttered. I stared at him, stunned. "I'm not asking for a handout," I said, my voice cracking. "I'll pay it back. Every cent." That's when he said it. "She has a future, Ian. You're just a burden." Those 5 words. I still hear them sometimes when I try to sleep. Then Mom chimed in with her soft, condescending tone, like she was the voice of reason. "We can't save you both," she said, as if I were a sinking ship that wasn't worth the rope. We already did what we could for Clara. The room fell quiet after that. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just nodded and said, "Thanks for the clarity." I moved out a week later. I didn't make a scene. I just quietly packed my things, canceled the utilities in my name, and left my key on the counter. I found a cheap studio apartment near the city hospital where I'd be undergoing the surgery. Thankfully, I had some savings of my own and a couple of friends who didn't hesitate to spot me what I couldn't cover. They didn't guilt-trip me. They didn't ask me what I'd done to deserve this. They just helped. Funny how people with no blood ties can feel more like family than the ones who raised you. The surgery went well, but recovery was brutal. I spent a week unable to move without wincing, another week throwing up everything I ate. I was alone through most of it, save for 1 or 2 friends who came by with groceries. My phone stayed silent. No calls. No texts. Not even a get well card. It was like I'd vanished from their family group chat the second I said I wouldn't be the silent punching bag anymore. But I didn't spiral. I didn't wallow. I started making plans. See, what my parents didn't know is that I'd been quietly helping them for years, paying for car repairs, covering surprise medical bills, even wiring Clara money back when she was figuring things out in LA. I kept records of everything. Every Venmo receipt, every text exchange where they asked for a small favor. At first, I did it because I loved them. Then I did it out of guilt. But by the end, I think I did it because I wanted proof. Proof that I mattered. I also had access to a joint investment account that my late grandfather had left behind when I was managing for tax reasons, because no one else in the family could be bothered to understand financial paperwork. They thought I'd just keep handling it out of loyalty. For a while, I did. But then came the 4th month. My health stabilized. My strength came back. And with it, a strange, focused clarity. I looked at my situation, at everything I'd endured, and I realized something. They didn't expect anything of me. Not love. Not success. Not even survival. I was invisible until I was useful. So I became silent and useful to myself. It started with the account. I reviewed every clause, every stipulation in the will, and realized something beautiful. The funds were meant for family emergencies. But there was no clause defining who got to decide what that meant. And as the only person with power of attorney on the file, I didn't have to ask permission. I made a few quiet moves, a few signature changes, and then I took action. I won't say exactly what I did yet, but let's just say I made sure they noticed my absence. Not just emotionally, not just physically, financially, structurally. The kind of absence you feel in your mortgage statements and your utility bills. The kind of absence that makes you look around and wonder, how did we lose control of this? And now? Now they're calling. Every day. Mom left a voicemail yesterday in that frantic, breathy tone she always used when she was trying to sound maternal. Ian, honey, just call us back. We're worried. We just want to talk. Dad's messages are colder. You're being immature. Enough of this. Clara even texted. Just one line. If this is about what Dad said, he didn't mean it like that. I didn't respond to a single message for 3 weeks. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had too much. And none of it deserved to be handed out in a text thread or a panicked call. I wanted them to feel what silence actually means. Not the kind of silence that comes from awkward dinners or ignored birthdays, but the kind that echoes, that grows louder the longer it's ignored. The kind that makes you question your own memories and choices. In the meantime, I got my strength back. Started working again, part-time at first, then gradually full-time. I took better care of myself. Signed up for therapy. Cut back on helping people who never helped me. And slowly, I began to realize I didn't need their version of family to be whole. I just needed to let go of the idea that they'd ever see me the way I wanted to be seen. But I wasn't done. Let me back up for a second and explain what that move was that they didn't see coming. So remember the investment account I mentioned earlier? The one Grandpa left behind? Turns out, when he passed, he left a quiet trail of trusts and clauses in place, something about safeguarding the next generation from repeating the mistakes of the last. And while my parents always said he was a soft old man with no backbone, the truth is he didn't trust them. Not completely. He trusted me. He made me the executor of his estate when I turned 25. Didn't tell anyone. I didn't even realize the depth of it until I started combing through the legal papers during recovery. And buried in that fine print was a provision that said the executor had sole discretion over the emergency family fund, the one my parents had been dipping into for Clara's blunders for the past 6 years. They thought that account had about $7,000 left. What they didn't know is that Grandpa had also invested in some long-term municipal bonds that matured last year and were quietly rolled into the fund without any notice. By the time I discovered it, the balance was just over $86,000. And because I had sole control, I made 3 moves. First, I had the account formally renamed, with my name as the primary beneficiary and manager. Second, I transferred 60% of the fund into a separate trust under my name, locked from access unless by direct court order. And third, I froze their access to the original joint account due to suspicious activity and reclassified it under administrative review, which, thanks to my documentation of how the funds were spent over the years, with no repayment or justification, qualified as misuse under the terms of the trust. In short, I didn't take the money. I protected it from them. And then I waited. At first, nothing happened. I assumed they hadn't checked the account yet. Or maybe they just assumed the balance was low from bailing Clara out, so they weren't in a rush to use it again. But then came the calls. Dad called first. Hey, just wondering if you know why the trust account isn't letting us in. We tried to set up a transfer to help Clara with rent, just a short-term thing. I didn't answer. 2 days later, Ian, this isn't funny. Your mother's worried sick. Call us back. I didn't. Then I got an email from Mom. One of those passive-aggressive ones dressed up like concern. Hi, honey. We noticed some changes with Grandpa's fund. If you've done something, we just want to understand. Maybe we made mistakes. We're all human. But please don't do something you'll regret. Family sticks together. Family sticks together. That one made me laugh out loud. The message that broke the dam came from Clara. She texted me on a Tuesday afternoon. Okay, I don't know what you did, but Dad is livid. He said you're sabotaging the family. Please call him before this gets worse. Worse? I hadn't even started. A few days later, Dad showed up at my apartment building. I saw him through the peephole, red-faced, pacing, muttering to himself on the phone. I didn't open the door. He left after 30 minutes and didn't leave a note. Just called again and again, his tone angrier each time. But even then, I stayed silent. What they still didn't know, what they couldn't know, is that I'd also taken steps with Grandpa's legal firm. I arranged for a formal audit of the original withdrawals they'd made from the account over the past 6 years. I had statements, screenshots, texts, invoices for Clara's business expenses that were clearly fraudulent. I compiled it all and sent it to the firm with a note. Please review for potential breach of trust guidelines, per Article 12 of the original estate documentation. I got a polite response 2 days later from a woman named Margaret at the firm. She thanked me for being thorough, said they'd be opening a quiet review. This could take some time, she warned. I told her I had time. And then, the real fallout began. Clara called me one night, slurring her words. Do you even know what you've done? She snapped. You've ruined everything. They were going to help me get a new place, and now the account's frozen. I'm behind on rent again. Do you even care? I finally replied. Did you care when I was in the hospital and no one visited? When I couldn't afford to eat and Mom said I was just being dramatic? Did you care? There was silence. Then the call dropped. No apology. No, I didn't know. Just silence. It's strange, the things you feel after something like that. You expect satisfaction, relief, power. But what I felt? Free. That's when I knew I was ready for the final step. The move they really didn't see coming. The one that would finally sever the strings they thought they could always pull. The final step wasn't revenge. It wasn't about punishing them, at least not in the traditional sense. It was about closing the door they kept pushing open with guilt and manipulation. It was about making it permanent this time. I spent the next week putting everything in motion. I started with my will. I know, dramatic for a 29-year-old, right? But after the health scare, I wasn't taking chances anymore. I met with a lawyer recommended by a friend who helped me draft everything cleanly. Simple language. Ironclad. I made sure none of my assets, current or future, would ever funnel back to them. Not a cent. Not a slice of equity. Not a penny from my savings, retirement, or insurance. Then I went to the bank and updated my beneficiaries. Removed both of my parents and Clara from every form and every policy. Listed a friend of mine, Jude, as my emergency contact instead. Jude's the kind of person who shows up without being asked. He's seen me at my worst and never judged me for it. I've known him since college, and not once has he ever made me feel like an afterthought. Then came the hardest part. There's this storage unit in town where I kept a bunch of family stuff, photo albums, letters, a few heirlooms that Grandpa left behind. My parents had no idea I had them. After Grandpa passed, I volunteered to handle the cleanup of his house, and they didn't care enough to question what I took. Inside that unit were photos of my childhood. Birthday cards from my 6th birthday. A framed photo of Clara and me in a sandbox, her arm around my shoulder. It used to mean something. But when I looked at it now, all I saw was how the image was frozen in time, while the reality had slowly rotted beneath it. I didn't throw them away, but I did something I never thought I'd do. I boxed them up, labeled them, returned to sender, and dropped them off at my parents' house early in the morning, before anyone was awake. I placed the box right on the doorstep. No note, no explanation, just a box full of memories they no longer deserved. And that same day, I went to the post office and filed a change of address form. Not just for mail, but for everything. I removed them from all emergency contacts, scrubbed them from any access to my accounts, and made sure every trace of my life was no longer linked to theirs. Then I made one more stop. The law firm handling Grandpa's estate had an office downtown. I met with Margaret in person. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, polite in that firm but kind way. We reviewed the audit progress, and she confirmed that several expenditures were flagged as unjustified withdrawals. That opened the door to consequences, possibly even civil litigation, depending on how far I wanted to take it. I don't want to sue them, I said. Margaret tilted her head. Then what do you want, Ian? I thought about it for a second. The way my father didn't even flinch when he called me a burden. The way my mom nodded along like it was a reasonable thing to say. The way Clara had always floated through life, confident that someone would bail her out, because someone always did. I want them to know I'm done, I said. Not angry. Not screaming. Just done. Margaret nodded, took a few notes, and slid a file across the desk. Then you'll want to sign this. It formally transfers all discretionary control of the trust into your new private account. They'll receive a notice that access has been permanently revoked. That should make things clear. I signed it. 2 days later, all hell broke loose. My phone exploded with calls. Not text calls. I hadn't heard my phone ring that much since college finals. First it was Mom, then Dad, then Clara again, using some new number, then my aunt, then my uncle. Someone even left a voicemail pretending to be a lawyer, like I wouldn't know it was my dad using a fake name. Then came the group email. It was actually titled Family Intervention in all caps. It was a desperate attempt at emotional blackmail, loaded with, "We didn't mean it like that," and "You've always been part of this family," and "Let's sit down and talk like adults." The kicker? They attached an old photo. Me at 10, wearing a handmade birthday crown, standing between my parents while Clara made a face behind me. The subject line? "Don't erase this." It almost worked. I stared at that photo for 10 minutes. Just sat there on my bed, holding the phone, remembering the scent of cake frosting and the way I used to think my family would always protect me. I remember Dad pushing me on the swing set, Mom braiding Clara's hair on the porch. All the little illusions. Then I remembered lying in that hospital bed, too weak to stand. The empty phone. The silence. And Dad's voice in my head again. "She has a future. You're just a burden." That photo didn't mean what they thought it did. It wasn't proof of love. It was proof of convenient love. Of image. Of pretending. Of only showing up when someone else was watching. So I replied. One line. "Thanks for the photo. You can keep the past. I've already moved on." That was a week ago. I haven't heard from them since. Not directly, at least. But yesterday, Jude told me he got a strange voicemail from my dad, asking if I was okay. Asking if I was spiraling. Saying they were worried. Worried. Funny. The only time they ever worried about me was when I stopped answering the phone. But they still don't know the final piece. The thing that'll hit the hardest. The part that'll finally close the door, no matter how many times they knock. And that's what comes next. I gave it one more week. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to see if the silence would settle, if they would stop trying, if the guilt they tried to manufacture would eventually flicker out on its own. It didn't. Not quite. The last call I received came 3 days ago. From my mom. She didn't yell. Didn't sob. She just spoke in this hollow, strange whisper like all the emotion had been drained from her voice. "We raised you," she said. "We did our best. Maybe we weren't perfect, but you're our son. I don't know what's gotten into you, Ian. This isn't who you are." And I just stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone to my ear, while that line, "This isn't who you are," rang through my head like a cheap bell. But she was wrong. This is who I am. Not cold. Not heartless. But someone who's finally learned not to set himself on fire to keep others warm. I didn't answer her. I just listened. And when she hung up, I blocked the number. One final tap of the screen, and it was done. Now, here's the part they really never saw coming. The last piece I hadn't told them, the final quiet move I'd been planning for nearly 4 months, had to do with Grandpa's legacy. Not the money. Not the house. Not even the trust fund. It was his name. See, my grandfather was a first-generation immigrant who started his own small company back in the early 1970s. Nothing huge, just a modest property management business that slowly grew through consistency and word of mouth. When he passed, it had a portfolio of 6 properties and a reputation for integrity. He left it to my dad to manage, but gave me part ownership as a legal buffer because, in his words, "Your father means well, but he doesn't always think things through." Well, not thinking things through was putting it mildly. After Grandpa passed, Dad got cocky. He refinanced one of the buildings to pay for Clara's entrepreneurial journey, which tanked in less than a year. Then he hired Clara to do bookkeeping, despite the fact that she once called Excel that green math app. She wasn't just bad at it. She was criminally careless. Rent payments weren't recorded. Utility bills were missed. Repairs went unaddressed. By the time I realized what was happening, after noticing late payment notices and tracking inconsistencies in the shared accounting log, one of the tenants had already moved out. Another filed a complaint with the city. That's when I made my move. Grandpa had placed a clause in the company's ownership structure. If any partner could prove mismanagement that threatened the long-term stability of the business, they could file for controlling interest. I filed the paperwork quietly with a corporate lawyer. 2 months later, I was legally granted full decision-making power. My father? Removed as managing partner. Clara? Let go. The board of directors, what little there was, approved it unanimously once they saw the books. My first act? I rehired the former property manager Dad had replaced, fixed the backlogged repairs, and reinstated the tenant support hotline. I also moved the business account to a new bank, where I set up strict spending protocols. But most importantly, I renamed the company. I dropped our family name entirely. Instead, I renamed it after Grandpa's middle name, one that had never been used professionally. I made the branding about legacy, responsibility, care. And then I sent a formal notice to my father and Clara. Effective immediately, you are no longer authorized to act in any capacity on behalf of the company previously known as Langley Properties. All accounts, assets, and communication channels have been reassigned under new management. Please direct any questions to our legal department. No further contact is necessary. I never heard back. Not one word. And that silence? It finally felt right. I'd taken back more than money, more than power. I'd taken back control of my own narrative, something they'd hijacked years ago and rewritten to suit their comfort. In their version, I was the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who would always come home for Thanksgiving no matter how many times they stepped on me. But I wasn't their story anymore. Now, I lived in a different part of the city. My apartment was small, but clean, filled with my things, my decisions. I had a growing group of friends, people who checked in, who laughed at my dumb jokes, who didn't measure my worth against someone else's failures. And yet, there were moments, quiet ones, when I'd wake up and feel this sudden, raw ache for something I couldn't name. Not regret, just grief, maybe. The kind that sneaks up on you when you realize the people who raised you never really saw you. But grief passes, eventually, like a bad storm. And sometimes, healing isn't loud. It's just choosing, day by day, not to let someone's cruelty define you. Not even if they're family. Especially if they're family. The last loose end came unexpectedly, through a letter. It was from one of Grandpa's old tenants, a retired teacher named Mrs. Bennett who lived in one of the units for over 20 years. She wrote to say thank you for the repairs, for keeping her rent stable, for sending someone to fix her bathroom heater without her needing to call 5 times. At the bottom, she wrote, "Your grandfather would be proud. Not because you saved the buildings, but because you remembered who they were for." I sat there for a long time, staring at that line. And for the first time in years, I felt something unshakable settle in my chest. Peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't plotting. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. I was just done. They could spend the rest of their lives pretending they didn't push me away. They could rewrite history, say I overreacted, say I was always distant. But the truth? I gave them more chances than they ever earned. I gave them more love than they ever returned. And when they made me choose between my health and their convenience, I chose me. And I'll keep choosing me every single time. My name is Eric. I'm 27 years old. And last night I sat at a table where everyone clapped, just not for me. Let me rewind a little. I've always been the reliable one. The one who shows up on time, pays his bills, keeps his head down. You know that guy at family dinners who doesn't say much, who asks about your job and listens instead of hijacking the conversation. That's me. And for a long time, I thought playing that role earned me something. Respect, love, maybe even a little appreciation. But in my family, it made me invisible. I grew up in a household where chaos was the baseline. My younger brother Jason was always the center of attention, usually because he'd done something wrong. Skipping school, getting into fights, stealing, lying, messing up every opportunity handed to him with Olympic-level consistency. And every time he got caught, there was this familiar routine: tears, second chances, and an elaborate new excuse. My parents would just sigh and say things like, "He's struggling," or "He just needs support," while I sat there wondering what I had to do to get half that grace. By the time I was 22, I had moved out, gotten a decent job in IT, and was quietly paying my parents' mortgage after Dad got laid off and Mom's hours were cut. I didn't advertise it. They asked, I helped. Simple. I paid for their groceries too, sometimes their car repairs, and once, when Jason got arrested for assaulting someone outside a bar, I paid for the lawyer. Not because I believed he was innocent, but because Mom called me crying, saying, "You're the only one we can turn to." That was always the line. You're the only one we can turn to. And maybe that's what made last night so surreal. It was supposed to be my graduation dinner. I'd just finished my master's degree in data science. 2 years of night classes, papers, projects, and working a full-time job on top of that. I hadn't even planned to celebrate, but Mom insisted. She said, "We're proud of you. Honey, we want to do something special." That alone should have tipped me off that something was off. My parents don't do special for me. They do necessary. Like a text that says, "Congrats. Love, Mom." Still, I let them plan it. I even booked the restaurant, put down the deposit, paid for the private room. I figured, maybe, just maybe, they were finally going to show me they saw what I'd done. All of it. The job, the degree, the endless financial support. I walked into that restaurant wearing the one suit I owned and a cautious smile. At first, everything seemed normal. The room looked nice. A few cousins I hadn't seen in years were there, smiling politely. The table was set. The food was coming out. I even got a glass of champagne put in front of me, which should have been a sign, because I don't drink, and Mom knows that. Then, just as I was about to thank everyone for coming, I heard clapping. Loud, over-the-top clapping. And I looked up, instinctively smiling like a fool, thinking maybe someone was toasting me. Maybe this was the moment they finally acknowledged me. Nope. Mom stood up and wiped a tear. "We're just so proud of Jason for turning his life around," she said, her voice trembling like she was announcing a Nobel Prize. "It's been a long road, but he's finally come out the other side." There was more clapping. Jason stood up next to her, smiling like he'd just invented fire. He had on this too-tight blazer, still creased like it had just come out of the store bag. He gave a little speech, something about growth and gratitude and being a better man. Then Dad reached into his pocket, pulled out a key fob, and tossed it across the table. "This is yours now," he said, his voice thick. "You deserve it more than anyone." I just sat there, holding the bill in my jacket pocket, the one I hadn't given the waiter yet because I thought maybe they'd insist on covering it. After all, it was supposed to be my night. I looked at Jason, then at Mom and Dad. I thought about the $1,800 I'd just wired to their account for this month's mortgage. I thought about the groceries I'd had Instacarted to their place because Mom said she was too tired to shop. I thought about the sleepless nights I spent studying while working overtime. I thought about how nobody asked if I was okay, how nobody ever did. But I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I just smiled. Because 3 days ago, I made a phone call. A quiet, calculated, deeply satisfying call to someone they forgot even existed. Her name's Vanessa, my dad's sister, my aunt. She used to be close with my parents until they cut her off over some petty argument 20 years ago. But Vanessa? She never forgot me. She used to send me little Christmas cards when I was a kid. And 3 days ago, I found her number in an old box while cleaning out my apartment. I called. She picked up on the second ring. We talked for 2 hours. Turns out, Vanessa's been doing well. Very well. She's a real estate consultant now. Owns 5 properties. She also remembered something I didn't. The house my parents live in? It's still legally under my name. When I started paying off the mortgage, they asked me to co-sign to help with refinancing, and the bank pushed it through with me as the primary. They never switched it back. Vanessa offered to help me figure out next steps. She even said, if they don't appreciate you, maybe it's time someone knocked some sense into them, literally. I laughed, but she wasn't joking. And last night, while Jason was basking in his parole party spotlight, Vanessa was on a flight to town with a copy of the deed, the account numbers, and a notarized transfer agreement. She lands tonight, and when she does, there's going to be a knock on their door they never expected. I didn't go back to my apartment after the dinner. Instead, I drove to a nearby park, sat in my car, and stared out at the empty baseball field as the lights flickered on. I let the silence fill me up like smoke in my lungs. I didn't cry. That's not really how I process things. But I sat there for almost an hour, just watching shadows move under the trees and thinking about all the times I let things slide. All the birthdays I skipped because I had to work overtime to make ends meet. Not even for me, but for them. All the family dinners where Jason showed up half drunk and still got the first slice of cake. The way Mom used to say, he's fragile, like I wasn't made of anything that could break. Eventually, I drove home, took off the suit I'd barely worn twice in my life, and folded it neatly. I put the receipt for the restaurant in the drawer, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted to remind myself later that I paid $873.42 for my own erasure. Vanessa's plane landed at 11:40 p.m. I was already at the terminal when she stepped out. She hadn't changed much since I last saw her when I was 12. Same sharp eyes, same calm energy that made people either respect her or hate her. She wore a navy blue trench coat and carried a black leather folder in one hand. "Eric," she said, with a small smile. "You look just like your dad, minus the permanent scowl." I laughed a little. She gave me a quick hug. Not long, not overly sentimental. Just real. We didn't go to a hotel. She came to my place. I made coffee even though it was close to midnight, and we sat at my kitchen table under the soft yellow glow of a single overhead bulb while she opened the folder. Inside were papers, a copy of the deed, with my name printed clearly at the top, statements showing the mortgage history, transfer rights, terms of termination, and then something extra. You're on all the utilities too, Vanessa said, tapping one page. Gas, electric, internet. You've been paying them out of your own accounts. Which means, she turned another page, then slid it over to me. You can legally shut them off at will. No notice needed. Since you're the financial holder, not just a contributor. I stared at the document. My name was all over it. Electricity, gas, water, internet. I just never realized the power I had. Vanessa leaned back. I know you're not the vindictive type, she said. But I also know you're tired. And people like your parents, like Jason, they don't learn from kindness. They exploit it. You've been feeding a system that only functions if you stay quiet. That hit me harder than I expected. Feeding a system. Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. They'd train me to be the silent provider. The bank account with feet. The obedient one who never needed a thank you because we're family was supposed to be enough. I nodded. Vanessa didn't push further. She just sipped her coffee and waited. The next morning, we drove together to the county office. She'd already made an appointment. I signed the necessary forms to begin the formal process of reclaiming the house. Legally, completely, and without discussion. I could have started with an eviction notice right there. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I had something else in mind. I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I was going to make sure they understood what they lost. We drove to the neighborhood, the same quiet cul-de-sac I grew up in, with the faded basketball hoop on the driveway and the cracked stepping stones Mom always said she'd fix. I parked across the street. Jason's new car, or rather, the one they just handed him, was sitting in the driveway, still shining like a promise someone else paid for. Vanessa stayed in the car while I walked up to the front porch. I didn't knock. I used my key. Inside, everything looked the same. The beige couch with the sagging cushions, the glass bowl full of dusty fake fruit, the family photos on the wall where Jason's face was always front and center and mine was always off to the side, like I'd photobombed my own life. I walked straight to the kitchen and unplugged the Wi-Fi router. Then I shut off the breakers, one by one, until the house went dark and silent. Then I walked out, got back in the car, and handed Vanessa the key. That was step one, I said. She nodded. Now we wait. We waited 2 hours. Around 4:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. Hey, sweetie, do you know if something's wrong with the power? Everything's out, and the bill says it was paid. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another text. Jason can't get online for his court-mandated therapy session. This isn't funny. Please respond. Then from Dad. Where are you? Did you do something? I turned off my phone and looked out the window. Across the street, the front door of the house opened. Jason stepped out, confused, holding his phone in the air, then stormed back inside. The house was completely dark now, except for the sliver of daylight spilling in through the windows. And that's when Vanessa reached into her folder, pulled out a small sealed envelope, and said, "Ready for step 2?" I took it. Inside was a letter, and an official notice that would change everything. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Not because of its weight, it was just a letter and a few documents, but because of what it meant. I held it in my lap for a second before opening it, letting the tension settle between my fingers. Vanessa sat beside me in the passenger seat, tapping her nails lightly against her coffee cup, saying nothing. She didn't need to. This part had to be mine. Inside the envelope were 3 things: a formal notice of revocation of occupancy agreement, a list of all expenses I had paid on the house in the past 3 years, complete with bank statements and annotated receipts, and, most importantly, a handwritten letter I had drafted but never had the nerve to send until now. I walked back across the street alone. No knocking this time either. I used the key one last time. Jason was sitting on the couch, squinting at his phone like the screen might magically start working again. My parents were in the kitchen, their voices low but urgent. The fridge door was open, light inside still glowing. The only thing in the house that hadn't shut down. Mom looked up and her face shifted from confusion to relief, like she thought I was there to fix everything, the way I always did. "Eric, thank God," she said. "Something's wrong with the electricity, the internet's down, and Jason can't." I walked straight past her, and placed the envelope on the counter. "What's this?" Dad asked, his arms crossed. I met his eyes. "Read it." Mom opened the letter first. I could see her eyes scanning the lines, her lips moving silently as she read. Then her expression started to change, a slow unraveling of the usual smug confidence into something tight, something vaguely panicked. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's legal," I said, "and binding." Jason stood up from the couch. "What are you talking about, man?" I turned to him. "You don't live here anymore. None of you do. Effective immediately, your right to reside in this house has been revoked. It's mine now. Legally. Financially. Everything. Are you kicking us out?" Mom asked, incredulous. "No," I said. "I'm correcting a mistake." Dad snatched the expense sheet from the envelope, and his face went red as he scanned it. "You kept track of everything?" "Of course I did," I said. "You told me I was family, not a landlord. But you treated me like an ATM. So now I'm just putting it all in writing. And in 3 days, a formal notice of eviction will be served. You'll have 30 days to leave." Jason started pacing. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't do this." I looked at him and smiled. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have. But 3 days ago, I called someone who reminded me I didn't have to keep playing the family scapegoat just to earn a seat at the table. Mom walked around the counter and tried to put a hand on my arm. "Sweetie, don't do this. We're your parents." "You are," I said quietly. "But you're also the people who clapped harder for a guy who just got out of jail than for the one who paid off your mortgage." Jason's face twisted. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said. "I know I am. But that's not the point. The point is, I'm done financing your mistakes." Dad stepped in now, his voice rising. "You're breaking this family apart." "No," I said, walking toward the door. "You broke it years ago. I'm just officially acknowledging it." I turned back to them once more before leaving. "You have until the end of the month. If you want to negotiate terms, talk to Vanessa. She's my legal representative now. And if you change the locks or try to pull anything stupid, just know, everything's in writing, and I have it all backed up in 3 places." I walked out, closed the door behind me, and this time, I didn't take the key with me. I left it in the mailbox, a symbolic gesture more than anything. I wouldn't need it anymore. Vanessa was waiting in the car, sunglasses on, engine running. "Let me guess," she said, smiling faintly. "They took it well." I didn't answer, just buckled my seatbelt and looked out the window. Across the street, the blinds were shaking slightly, like someone was peeking out but didn't want to be seen. "They're going to panic," I said finally. Vanessa nodded. "Good." We drove off in silence. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, clear. And then my phone buzzed again. Not from Mom. Not from Dad. Not from Jason. It was a number I didn't recognize, a voicemail. I put it on speaker. A shaky voice came through. "Eric, it's me, your cousin Allison. I heard what happened. And I just wanted to say, I saw the graduation post online. I'm proud of you. Always have been." There was a pause. "Also, if you need help with anything, let me know. I'm not like them." I looked over at Vanessa. She smiled. Looks like someone just picked a side. But she had no idea what was coming next. Because the next knock on my parents' door wasn't going to come from me or Vanessa. It was going to come from someone none of us had heard from in years. And when she showed up, the entire game would change. 2 days passed. I kept my phone on silent, but I didn't turn it off. I wanted to see the fallout, not to gloat, but because part of me needed to know they were finally feeling what I'd swallowed in silence for years. Uncertainty, fear, a world that didn't just bend for them. The texts poured in like clockwork. "Eric, this isn't you. We can talk about this. Jason's job depends on this address. If he loses it, it's on you. Are you really evicting your own family?" I didn't respond to any of them. Vanessa handled the legal prep while I worked my usual hours from home, drank my coffee, and took long walks through the city, breathing in freedom I hadn't realized I'd been missing. That gnawing sense of obligation was gone. I no longer woke up to dread disguised as duty. But the real shift started on the 3rd night. Vanessa and I had just finished dinner at a small Ethiopian place she liked downtown when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and raised an eyebrow. "It's her," she said. I blinked. "You mean?" She nodded. "Yep. She just landed." The next morning, we drove out to the house again. Not to go inside. I wouldn't do that. Not yet. We parked down the block in Vanessa's car, watched the windows from a distance. The place looked hollow. No lights. No movement. The car Jason got as a gift sat slightly crooked in the driveway, one tire already low. The lawn hadn't been cut, and a pile of newspapers sat untouched near the porch. Then, just past 9 a.m., a silver SUV pulled up and parked directly in front of the house. The door opened. A woman stepped out, tall, dark gray suit, polished flats, her hair tied back in a tight braid. She looked like someone who wasn't here to make friends or forgive anything. Vanessa exhaled slowly. God, she hasn't changed. I watched silently as the woman walked up the porch and knocked once. Not aggressively, just a firm, decisive knock. She didn't fidget. She didn't glance around. She knew they were home. That knock wasn't a question, it was an announcement. Mom answered. From the way her posture immediately shrunk, I knew she recognized her. Is that? I asked, still not quite believing it. Vanessa smiled tightly. That's Judge Clarissa Brooks. Retired, but still very, very sharp. I turned to her. Wait, Judge Brooks. As in, Aunt Clarissa. Vanessa nodded. She's my cousin. Your dad's second cousin, technically. They had a falling out years ago when she told him flat out that enabling Jason would ruin the family. He called her bitter and jealous. She never spoke to him again. She's a judge, I said, stunned. She was. Civil litigation. Property and contract disputes. She moved to Oregon a while back, but when I called her, Vanessa shrugged. Let's just say she's been waiting for a reason to get involved. We watched from the car as Mom stood frozen at the door. Judge Brooks said something, short, sharp, and handed her a folder. Then she stepped inside. Vanessa handed me a tablet. Security cameras, she said, grinning. Motion triggered. I installed them last week while you were at work. I stared at her. You did what? She tapped the screen. Check the kitchen feed. I tapped into the live stream. The camera wasn't hidden. It was just placed in the corner of the kitchen, angled perfectly to show the counter and most of the living room. It was technically still my property, so everything was legal. On screen, Judge Brooks stood in the middle of the room, holding court in the most literal sense. She didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She just spoke like a person used to having the final word. So unless you have documented evidence that Eric willingly gifted you the title, the deed stands. And if you attempt to challenge it, you'll not only lose, you'll be responsible for legal fees, damages, and back interest. Mom sat in a dining chair, visibly shrinking. Jason paced behind her, throwing up his hands. This is insane. That house is ours. I grew up here. You grew up in it, Brooks corrected. You didn't buy it. You didn't maintain it. You didn't own it. Dad walked in now, his voice booming. You don't get to march in here and tear apart our family. Judge Brooks turned to him slowly. You tore your family apart the moment you chose to reward failure over loyalty. Now you're reaping what you sowed. I almost laughed. It was surgical. Mom spoke up again, her voice fragile. What are we supposed to do? Just pack up and leave. Judge Brooks opened the folder again and pulled out a final sheet. You have two options. Vacate willingly within 30 days and sign the property handover agreement. Or fight it, lose in court, and walk out with nothing but a debt to your own son. Either way, this house is no longer yours. Jason slammed his palm on the table. You can't do this. She turned to him. I already did. The camera feed paused. Vanessa had turned off the tablet. That's enough for now, she said softly. I looked at her. You didn't tell me she was a judge. Vanessa shrugged again. I wanted it to be a surprise. Besides, revenge is better when it comes from someone wearing pearls and a three-piece suit. Outside, the front door of the house opened again. Judge Brooks stepped out, calm as ever, folder in hand. She didn't look back. And as she passed Jason's car, she paused, pulled out a small envelope from her coat, and slipped it under his windshield wiper. Vanessa laughed. What's that? I asked. Probably the lien notice, she said. Jason's car? Still under your parents' name. And guess who defaulted on their credit union line of credit last month? I stared. Oh, you thought the gift car was free? She added, amused. No. They financed it, using the house's value as collateral. And now that the house wasn't theirs, that car was as good as gone. We sat in silence, the kind that says everything. I didn't feel joy exactly, not even triumph. What I felt was release. A long, quiet exhale that had been building for a decade. My whole life, I'd waited for someone to stand up for me. Turns out, it was always going to be me, with the right people at my side. But it wasn't over yet. Because that night, Jason showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door, screaming, begging, threatening. and saying the one thing I never thought I'd hear him say. He pounded like the door owed him something, like the wood and hinges were personally responsible for his life falling apart. It was close to midnight, and I had just finished cleaning up after dinner when I heard the first slam. Not a knock, a slam, followed by muffled yelling that grew louder as I approached the door. "Eric, open up. I know you're in there." Vanessa was already beside me, calm as always. She motioned for me to wait before opening it. We both listened. Jason's voice carried through the door like thunder on a tin roof. "I just want to talk." "Okay, just talk. We're brothers, man. Family. You can't seriously be doing this. You can't." I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I just waited until he paused, breathing hard, as if the weight of his own choices had finally settled into his chest. Then I opened the door. He looked awful. Not like someone who had hit rock bottom. More like someone who realized there was a bottom and he'd been sprinting toward it. His eyes were red, his shirt wrinkled and stained, and his posture, this was new, was slumped. Like something inside him had snapped or maybe finally sobered up. I didn't say anything. Jason blinked hard. "They're losing it, man. Mom's been crying nonstop. Dad won't come out of the garage. They think you're actually going to go through with this." "I already have," I said. He ran a hand through his greasy hair. "Look, I know I messed up. I know I haven't been great, or fair, or even decent. But you don't have to burn everything down just to prove a point." Vanessa stood behind me, arms crossed. "He's not burning it down, Jason. He's finally rebuilding it, without the rot." Jason looked past me at her, then back at me. "Seriously? You got her coaching you now? This is your family, Eric, not hers." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "Let's talk," I said. He backed up a bit, like he wasn't sure whether I was about to punch him or help him up. "You remember when we were 16? I began. "And you got caught shoplifting those sunglasses from the mall?" Jason blinked. "What does that have to do with?" "I took the blame," I said flatly. "Told Dad they were mine. Got grounded for 2 months. You didn't say a word." He went silent. "You remember when you crashed Dad's old Corolla during that party?" "I lied to the insurance guy. Said it was me. They covered it. You didn't say a word." He shifted on his feet. "And when you got arrested? The lawyer you used? That was me. The retainer. The late-night paperwork. All of it." Jason was staring at the floor now. "You never said thank you. Not once. You never even asked how I was doing. You just assumed I'd always be there. Because I was the good son. The one who didn't cause problems. The one who didn't need anything." He looked up, his voice quieter now. "I didn't think you cared about that stuff." "I didn't," I said, until I realized it was the only thing anyone ever expected of me. He looked like he wanted to argue, to fight, but there was nothing left to defend. "Jason," I said, softer now, "I don't hate you. I don't even want revenge. But I'm done carrying the weight of people who keep handing me bricks." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "So what now?" he finally asked. "You leave," I said. "You find your own way. Get a job. Start over. Prove them right, that you've turned your life around. But you do it without my money, without my couch, and without my silence." He stared at me, then let out a slow breath. "All right," he said. "I get it." He turned and walked down the hallway, slower than he'd arrived. No screaming, no fists against the wall, just heavy, reluctant footsteps. I watched from the door as he disappeared into the night. Vanessa came up beside me. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I actually am." The eviction went through. 30 days later, the house was empty, clean, quiet. I sold it within the month and used the profit to put a down payment on a duplex. I moved into one half and rented the other to a quiet couple with a baby and a bulldog named Waffles. Mom and Dad tried to reach out, once. A voicemail from Mom that started with, "I know things got heated," and ended with, "You'll always be our son." I deleted it without listening to the middle. Jason sent a single message a few months later. "Got a job. Not much, but it's mine. Hope you're well." I didn't reply, but I didn't block him either. That was the first time I realized what peace really felt like. Not a big dramatic ending, just silence, boundaries, a quiet apartment where no one expected anything from me I wasn't willing to give. And every now and then, when I walk past the mirror in the hallway, I nod to myself. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not the background character in someone else's story. I'm the author. I'm Trevor, 29, and if you asked anyone who knows me, they'd probably say I'm the calm one in the family. The guy who never blows up, who quietly works, pays his bills, and doesn't get dragged into drama. Which is funny, because for as long as I can remember, my older brother Ryan has been a walking disaster. You know how every family has that one sibling who somehow always lands on their feet no matter how bad they mess up? That's Ryan. Growing up, Ryan was the golden child. He could skip class and still get a pat on the back from our parents. He could borrow my bike and bring it back with a bent rim, and Mom would scold me for not sharing nicely. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. Summer jobs, saving for my first car, working through college. When Dad got sick a few years back, guess who handled hospital visits, insurance calls, and bills? Not Ryan. He was finding himself in another city. Fast forward to last year, when Mom convinced me and Ryan to open a joint savings account for emergencies, things like medical bills for her, help with Dad's prescriptions, or even repairs on the house if something went wrong. I didn't love the idea, but she insisted it would make things easier. "You're both adults now. You can handle sharing money responsibly," she said. Famous last words. At first, it was fine. We both contributed, me regularly, Ryan sporadically, usually after I nudged him. It gave me a sense of security, like we had a safety net if life threw us another curveball. But slowly, I started noticing little things. Withdrawals at weird times, small amounts missing. I told myself it was probably just Ryan grabbing gas money or covering something minor. Then, 2 weeks ago, Ryan called me sounding unusually cheerful. "Hey bro, guess what? Jess and I are finally taking that Europe trip we've been talking about." Jess is his girlfriend. Nice enough, but she's been in Ryan's ear about living it up before they settled down. I congratulated him, but a part of me wondered how he could afford it. Ryan isn't exactly known for budgeting. 3 days after that call, I logged into the joint account to transfer money for a car repair. My stomach dropped. The balance was almost empty. Not just a few $100s gone. I'm talking most of what we'd saved over the last year. My name was on that account. I'd been the one putting in steady deposits. It felt like someone had kicked me in the chest. I tried to call Ryan. No answer. I texted him. Nothing. Checked Instagram out of pure curiosity, and there they were, Ryan and Jess at the airport, smiling with their boarding passes, captioned, "Europe, here we come." I stared at my phone so long the screen went dark. I didn't sleep that night. My brain wouldn't shut off. Anger, betrayal, disbelief, it all swirled together until I felt physically sick. I'd worked double shifts last fall to build that savings back up, and he just drained it? For a vacation? The next morning, I went to the bank. I asked for a full statement, printed and highlighted every withdrawal that wasn't mine. The teller gave me this sympathetic look as she slid the papers across the counter. "You can file a fraud claim," she said gently. "Even though he's on the account, if he took the funds without your consent, you have options." I walked out of that bank with a stack of paperwork and a storm in my chest. My hands were shaking, part rage, part adrenaline. I wasn't sure if I was ready to go nuclear on my own brother, but then I thought about Dad's medical bills last winter. About all those nights I stayed late at work just to keep us afloat. About Ryan breezily posting, "Work hard, play hard," on his story while I was crunching numbers to pay for our parents' prescriptions. By the time I got home, the decision was made. I filled out every page, attached every statement, submitted it, and just like that, the account was frozen. That night, I finally got a text from Ryan. A photo of him and Jess on a cobblestone street in Paris, holding wine glasses. "Living the dream, man," it said. I didn't reply. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was at work. It was Ryan. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. The first thing I heard was his voice, panicked, almost shouting. "Trevor, what the heck did you do? My card just got declined. I'm stuck in Paris with no cash. I can't even book a ticket home." I sat there in silence for a moment, letting his words hang in the air. Then I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, my mind buzzing with everything I wanted to say. And that's when it hit me. This was just the beginning. When I didn't answer right away, Ryan's tone went from panic to anger in a snap. "Trevor, don't just sit there. Unfreeze the account. You can't just do that to me." His voice was loud enough that a few of my coworkers looked up from their desks. I slipped out into the hallway, my pulse hammering in my ears. "You cleaned out our savings," I said flatly. "It was a joint account," he shot back. "I'm allowed to use it. You're making a big deal out of nothing." "Nothing." I almost laughed. "You took nearly $10,000 and didn't even tell me." "That was for emergencies, Ryan. Medical bills. Mom and Dad. Oh my gosh, Trevor, stop acting like the world's ending. You've always been dramatic about money. I told you we were going to Europe. You didn't say no. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles hurt. You didn't ask. You announced it after you'd already bought the tickets. And then you drained the account. He groaned on the other end. Look, Jess and I are stranded. Our card isn't working. We can't even pay for the Airbnb tonight. You're ruining our trip. Just unfreeze it, and I'll pay you back when I can. I could practically hear Jess whispering in the background, urging him on. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice calm. You're the one who turned this into a problem. I'm not bailing you out. Ryan swore under his breath, then hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time, half expecting him to call back. Instead, the text messages started. First, you're seriously being a jerk right now. Then, if Mom and Dad hear about this, you're going to look like the bad guy. Then, a few minutes later, you wouldn't even have that money if it wasn't for me agreeing to the account in the first place. Think about that. I turned my phone face down on my desk and tried to focus on work, but by lunchtime, it was buzzing nonstop. My sister-in-law, Jess, had joined the chorus. This was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime trip. You're punishing us for living our lives. Grow up. By the time I clocked out, there were 10 missed calls from Ryan and 3 from Mom. I knew that meant only one thing. He dragged her into it. When I walked into my apartment that night, I didn't even have my shoes off before my phone rang again. It was Mom. Trevor, she said, her tone clipped. What on earth is going on? Ryan just called me in tears. In tears, I repeated. He stole from me, Mom. She sighed. It's a joint account. He didn't steal. He just borrowed more than his share. You know how he is. He's always been a little impulsive. I laughed bitterly. Impulsive? He wiped out our savings and left me with nothing. That's not impulsive, that's selfish. Trevor, please, she said, lowering her voice like I was a child she had to reason with. He's in another country. He has no way to get home if you don't release those funds. That's not my problem, I said before I could stop myself. Her shocked silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. I can't believe how cold you're being, she said finally. Ryan has always been there for you. I cut her off. No, he hasn't. When Dad was in the hospital, who stayed overnight, who drove you back and forth to appointments. It wasn't Ryan. I was the one holding everything together. Mom's tone hardened. You're being spiteful. This isn't like you. I raised you to take care of family. Funny how that only applies to me, I muttered. That ended the call. For a few hours, things went quiet. Then Dad called. His voice was tired, measured, the way it gets when he's trying not to take sides, but secretly already has. Trevor, son, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but your brother is in a tough spot. Can't you just give him a little money so he can get home? You can fight about the rest later. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Dad, if I give in now, he'll never learn. He'll do this again the next time he wants something. There has to be a line somewhere. Dad sighed heavily. You're not wrong. But do you really want to be the reason your brother gets stranded overseas? Think about how that'll look. To the rest of the family. To your grandparents. That last part stung. They knew I hated making waves. They were using that against me. The next morning, the group chat lit up. Aunt Linda chimed in first, clearly after hearing a very edited version of events. Trevor, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. Ryan said you froze the account by mistake. Can you fix it? Then came Cousin Mark. Not cool, man. Leaving family stranded in Paris? I almost threw my phone across the room. Ryan was spinning this like I was the villain. Not him. Not the guy who siphoned thousands from the account for a wine-tasting vacation. Me. I ignored the chat, but Ryan didn't let up. Every few hours, a new barrage of texts would come through. You're making me look bad in front of Jess's family. Do you know how humiliating it is to beg for cash from strangers? If I miss my flight back, that's on you. Each message chipped away at my resolve. Not because I felt guilty, but because I could feel the narrative shifting. I was becoming this selfish brother in everyone's eyes. The guy who wouldn't help. The guy who left Ryan stranded. By day 3, I was exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Everywhere I turned, someone was reminding me that I was the one holding all the power. And with that power came blame, judgment, and pressure to cave. Then, out of nowhere, Ryan escalated. He sent me a selfie of himself sitting on a curb outside what looked like a cafe, looking miserable. The caption read, "Hope you're happy. We might have to sleep outside tonight." Something about that broke through my frustration and hit a new nerve. Not sympathy, anger. The kind of deep, quiet anger that doesn't shout or throw things, but sharpens you. That night, I sat down at my desk and went through every document again. The bank statements, the emails, the fraud claim paperwork. I double-checked that everything was airtight. Ryan wasn't just careless, he was reckless. And if I let him win this time, he'd do it again. I drafted a single, simple reply. My finger hovered over the send button. I could feel my heart hammering, the weight of the entire family's judgment pressing down on me. And just as I was about to send it, another message came through from Ryan. This one different. If you don't fix this by tomorrow, don't bother coming to Thanksgiving. I froze, staring at the screen. This wasn't just pressure. This was an ultimatum, a threat. And that was the moment something inside me clicked. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at that message from Ryan, reading it over and over until the words felt burned into my brain. Don't bother coming to Thanksgiving. He wasn't just threatening me. He was cutting me out of the family if I didn't comply. At first, I thought maybe it was just a heat-of-the-moment outburst. Ryan has always been dramatic when things don't go his way. But then, the next morning, I woke up to find my phone buzzing with new notifications. My mom had sent a group text. Everyone, Ryan and Jess are stuck in Paris because Trevor froze the account. They have no money to get home. We're all chipping in to send them some emergency funds, but this could have been avoided if Trevor hadn't overreacted. There it was, in black and white. Not just Ryan's spin on things, but Mom broadcasting it to the whole family. She wasn't just disappointed, she was actively painting me as the villain. Within minutes, cousins, aunts, and even my grandparents started weighing in. Trevor, we don't understand why you'd do something so extreme. It's just money. Ryan said he was going to pay it back. You should be ashamed of yourself, leaving your brother in a foreign country like that. Each message was like a little jab, wearing me down. I typed out several responses, then deleted them all. I wasn't going to plead my case in a group chat like a defendant in a family trial. By noon, I got another call from Dad. This time, his voice was sharper. Son, your mom is really upset. Your brother says you won't even answer his calls now. Because every time I pick up, he screams at me. I said, trying to keep my tone even. He's desperate, Dad countered. They don't have anywhere to stay tonight. I took a deep breath. Dad, I need you to listen to me. He took almost $10,000. Without asking. Without telling me. Do you know how many hours I worked to save that money? There was a pause, and for a second I thought I'd gotten through to him. But then he said, it's not about the money anymore. It's about the principle. Family doesn't do this to each other. That was rich, coming from him. You're right, I said, my voice tight. Family doesn't do this to each other. And yet here we are. I hung up before he could reply. I thought that might be the end of it for a day or two. Maybe the guilt trip would taper off if I didn't respond. But that evening, I got home from work and found something waiting for me in my mailbox, a letter. Not just any letter. It was from our family lawyer. Confused, I tore it open right there in the hallway. The letter was short, but it made my blood run cold. Trevor, this is to inform you that your parents have requested the bank to release control of the joint account back to them for safekeeping due to a dispute between you and Ryan. They have asked that you voluntarily withdraw your name from the account to avoid further conflict. Please respond within 72 hours. I just stood there, gripping the letter so hard it crumpled in my fist. They were trying to take my name off the account I had funded more than anyone, just to give Ryan access again. I stormed upstairs, shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. This wasn't just Ryan being reckless. This was my whole family lining up behind him, willing to rewrite reality so he could get his way. Before I could even process it, my phone rang again. Ryan. I answered this time, my voice cold. What do you want? He didn't waste time with pleasantries. So, you saw the letter? Yeah, I saw it. Good. This can all go away if you just step aside. Mom and Dad will take care of the account, and I'll pay you back when I can. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. You really think I'm going to just roll over and give you full access again? After what you did? You're making this harder than it has to be, he snapped. Everyone's on my side. You're the only one still being difficult. You think that makes you right? I think it makes me the only sane one. I shot back. He went quiet for a moment, then said, almost smugly, fine. Don't say I didn't warn you. Warn me about what? I asked, but he'd already hung up. 2 hours later, I got my answer. A cousin sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post. It was from Ryan. A long, self-pitying paragraph about how he and Jess had been abandoned overseas by a family member who chose money over blood. There was even a photo of him looking pitiful outside the Eiffel Tower, like some kind of charity case. The comments section made my stomach turn. People I hadn't talked to in years were chiming in. Wow, can't believe your brother would do that. Some people really show their true colors when money's involved. Hang in there, Ryan. You'll be home soon. I felt my face go hot. It wasn't just a private family drama anymore. Ryan had gone public, airing our dirty laundry online, dragging my name through the mud for anyone to see. I closed my laptop and sat there in the dark, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, my heart pounding in my ears. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't even about the account. This was about Ryan turning everyone against me. About him deciding that my boundaries didn't matter, that my hard work was his to spend, my reputation his to smear. And as I sat there, staring at the crumpled letter on my kitchen table, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to make sure Ryan regretted ever thinking he could cross me like this. The next few days felt like I was living in someone else's life. I went through the motions, got up, went to work, came home, but everything felt heavy, like I was wading through water. I couldn't shake the pit in my stomach every time my phone buzzed. At first, I tried ignoring everything. The group chat, the calls, the passive-aggressive posts Ryan kept making. But silence didn't stop the storm. If anything, it made it worse. My absence became its own narrative. Suddenly, I wasn't just this selfish brother. I was also the coward who couldn't face what he'd done. One night, after a particularly rough day at work, I sat on my couch scrolling through Facebook even though I knew I shouldn't. There it was, another post from Ryan, this time with a GoFundMe link. Our family emergency fund was unfairly frozen while we were abroad, leaving us stranded. Anything helps. I felt my throat tighten. He'd actually gone and turned this into a public charity case. The comments were full of sympathy, and I noticed a few mutual friends had already donated. My anger and humiliation were a tangle inside my chest. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being made into the villain of someone else's story. People I'd known since high school were leaving comments like, "That's so cruel. I can't imagine doing that to my brother." I closed the app and set my phone down. For the first time in days, I let myself cry. Not the angry, frustrated tears I'd been holding back, but the kind that come when you finally accept something is broken and might never go back to how it was. After that night, something in me went quiet. I stopped answering calls completely. When Mom called twice in a row one morning, I silenced the phone and put it face down on my desk. When Dad texted, I left it on read. I even muted the family group chat entirely, something I'd never done before. And for the first time in my life, I skipped Sunday dinner. Sunday dinners had always been non-negotiable in our family. No matter how busy we were, Mom made sure everyone came home to sit around the same table. But that week, I stayed in my apartment, ate takeout, and turned my phone off. An hour into dinner, Mom sent me a picture of the table. Ryan's chair conspicuously empty too, since he was still abroad. "This is what family looks like, Trevor," her message read. "Don't throw it away over money." I stared at the photo until my eyes blurred, then set the phone aside. It wasn't just money anymore, and deep down, I think she knew that. The following Monday, I met with the bank manager in person. I wanted to make sure everything with the fraud claim was airtight. The manager walked me through the process carefully, explaining how they'd flagged the withdrawals and were investigating. "You did the right thing filing this," she said. "It might take a while, but we'll get to the bottom of it." Her calm confidence was the first real reassurance I'd had in weeks. It didn't make the pain go away, but it gave me something solid to hold on to. That night, I spread everything out on my kitchen table: bank statements, transaction logs, screenshots of Ryan's posts, even copies of the texts he'd sent me. Looking at it all at once was sobering. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. Ryan had taken the money, spun the story, and then mobilized the entire family to pressure me into backing down. And when that didn't work, he'd gone public, using pity to make himself look like the victim. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the mess, until a thought started to form, slow, steady, like a seed pushing through the soil. What if I stopped reacting and started planning? Up until that point, I'd been on the defensive, reacting to Ryan's choices, reacting to my parents' guilt trips, reacting to the public fallout. But what if I turned the tables? That night, instead of doom scrolling, I opened my laptop and started researching. I read about joint account protections, fraud claims, and my rights as a co-owner. I learned that as long as the account was frozen, neither of us could touch the money, which meant Ryan's vacation fund was well and truly gone. It wasn't much, but it was something, a sliver of control. The next weekend, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove out to the lake near our childhood home. It was late afternoon, the sun low and golden, turning the water into a sheet of fire. I sat on the hood of my car and just thought about the kid version of me who used to idolize his big brother. Thought about the countless times I'd bailed Ryan out, from paying his speeding tickets in college to covering his share of mom's medical bill last year when he forgot. Thought about how each time I told myself it was the last. And here we were. By the time the sun dipped below the trees, I felt calmer. Not happier, not less hurt, but clearer. This wasn't just about Ryan learning a lesson anymore. It was about me deciding I wouldn't let him keep writing the narrative of my life. When I got home that night, I cleaned my apartment for the first time all week. Did the dishes. Changed the sheets. It felt like reclaiming something. A small piece of control. A reminder that my world hadn't completely fallen apart. The following morning, I called the family lawyer who had sent the letter. Calmly, professionally, I told him I would not be withdrawing my name from the account and that I expected the freeze to remain in place until the investigation was complete. There was a pause on the other end. "I see," he said. "Your parents will be disappointed." "I'm sure they will," I replied evenly. "But this isn't up for debate." I hung up, feeling a strange mix of dread and relief. That night, Mom sent me another message. "We need to talk. Everyone is coming here next weekend. I expect you to be there so we can work this out as a family." It wasn't phrased as a question. I stared at the screen for a long time. A week ago, I would have felt cornered by that message. Now, I just felt ready. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because for the first time since this all started, I wasn't just bracing for the next blow. I was starting to think about how to hit back. The days leading up to the family meeting felt different this time. For weeks, I'd been carrying this constant knot of dread in my stomach, bracing myself for every phone call and message. But now there was something steadier under my ribs. Not happiness exactly, but resolve. The first thing I did was get my own financial house in order. I'd always been careful with money, but losing almost everything I'd saved in one reckless move had woken me up in a way nothing else had. I opened a new, entirely separate savings account in my name only. I set up automatic transfers from my paycheck, small, manageable amounts that would slowly rebuild what Ryan had taken. Just seeing that balance start to grow, even by a little, made me feel like I was reclaiming some control over my future. Then I called the bank manager again. We went over the fraud claim, and she confirmed that the account was staying frozen until the investigation wrapped up, something Ryan definitely wouldn't be happy about. "Do you want me to notify the other account holder of that decision?" she asked gently. "No," I said after a pause. "He'll find out on his own." After that call, I found myself sleeping better for the first time in weeks. No more 3 a.m. doom scrolling. No more staring at the ceiling rehearsing arguments I'd never win. I even started going to the gym again. Nothing crazy, just half an hour after work. It felt good to move, to sweat out some of the frustration that had been trapped in my body for so long. By the end of the week, people at work were noticing. "You look less stressed," my coworker said one afternoon as we grabbed coffee. "I feel less stressed," I admitted. And it was true. Not because the situation was resolved, but because I was finally playing offense instead of defense. In the evenings, I started doing more research. Not just about fraud claims, but about legal protections, financial recovery, even mediation rights for co-owners of accounts. The more I read, the more I realized that Ryan's leverage over me had been an illusion. He wasn't in control. He just acted like he was. And the family played along because it was easier to let him be dramatic than to confront him. I also started quietly gathering receipts. Not just the bank statements, but old texts where Ryan had admitted to borrowing money before, screenshots of his posts, even Venmo requests from last year when I'd paid off his share of mom's medical bill. I put everything in a folder on my laptop, labeling and dating each file. It felt methodical, almost therapeutic. Each document was a brick, and together they were building something solid, a wall between me and Ryan's narrative, a shield against the version of me he was selling to the family. Meanwhile, Ryan kept posting online. painting himself as the tragic hero of this story. At first, the post got dozens of comments, people sending well wishes and donations. But as the weeks went on, the tone started shifting. People were asking questions. Where was the money going? Why weren't they home yet? Why was he still posting photos of fancy dinners in Rome if he was supposedly broke? I didn't comment. I didn't like or react. I just watched. It was fascinating, really, seeing how quickly sympathy could curdle into suspicion once people realized they were being played. Then, midweek, something happened that sealed my resolve. I got my first update from the bank's fraud department. Mr. Lewis, the email began. We've reviewed the initial evidence and determined that the withdrawals in question were made without your consent and do not match your typical spending patterns. We will be continuing with the investigation and pursuing recovery of the funds. I must have read that line 10 times. Pursuing recovery of the funds. I sat back in my chair, smiling for the first time in days. A real smile, not the tight-lipped grimace I'd been wearing around the office. The next day, I met with a financial advisor. Something I'd been putting off for years because I always felt like I wasn't ready or didn't have enough saved yet. We went over everything: my income, expenses, debt, future goals. You're actually in better shape than you think, she told me. This setback is painful, but it doesn't define your future. We can get you back on track. When I left her office, I felt lighter. For the first time, I could picture a future where I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. That weekend, I cleaned out my apartment. Not just a surface-level tidy up, but a full purge. Old clothes, junk mail, clutter I'd been holding onto for no reason. Bag after bag went to donation bins. By the time I was done, the place felt different, calmer, like it matched the version of me I was trying to become. On Sunday night, I finally opened Mom's message again. Everyone is coming here next weekend. I expect you to be there so we can work this out as a family. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, I'll be there. But this time, I wasn't going to show up to be scolded, shamed, or cornered into apologizing. I wasn't going to be the quiet, responsible brother who just absorbs the hit so everyone else can feel comfortable. I was going to walk into that house on my own terms, with every receipt, every document, every piece of proof lined up like dominoes. And if they wanted a reckoning, they were going to get one. The week leading up to the family gathering felt strangely calm, almost like the eye of a storm. For the first time since Ryan drained the account, I wasn't flinching every time my phone lit up. I wasn't scrambling to defend myself in the group chat or justify my choices to anyone. Instead, I was focused. Every evening after work, I sat down at my kitchen table and fine-tuned my plan. I started by organizing the evidence folder on my laptop into clear, chronological order. First, the bank statements showing the steady deposits I'd made into the joint account over the past year, usually double what Ryan contributed. Then, the withdrawals that had started popping up right after he announced his trip, culminating in the massive transfer that left us nearly empty. Next, I added the texts. The ones where Ryan had said things like, "I'll pay you back when I can," which were basically admissions that he hadn't had permission in the first place. Then the ones where he threatened me, called me selfish, and told me not to show up for Thanksgiving. I even took screenshots of his public posts, the ones that turned me into the villain, and saved the comments. People telling me to do the right thing, accusing me of abandoning my brother, praising Ryan for staying strong. I wanted the family to see exactly how far he'd gone to play the victim. But it wasn't just about having the receipts. It was about knowing how to use them. So, I started practicing. It sounds silly, but I actually stood in front of my bathroom mirror a few nights in a row, rehearsing what I was going to say. Not a speech. I didn't want to sound scripted, but calm, deliberate statements that couldn't be twisted into an outburst. I pictured Mom trying to guilt-trip me, Dad trying to mediate, Ryan blowing up. I rehearsed staying calm through all of it. Because if there's one thing I knew about Ryan, it's that he thrives when I lose my cool. If I show anger, he gets to play the victim. Not this time. Midweek, I got a call from the fraud department again. "Mr. Lewis," the woman on the other end said, "I wanted to let you know we've completed our review of the account activity. The funds are officially being classified as unauthorized withdrawals. We'll be initiating a recovery process, and depending on the outcome, we may issue a refund directly to you." I blinked, hardly daring to believe it. "So, I might actually get my money back?" "That's correct," she said. "We can't guarantee the timeline yet, but it's moving in that direction. When I hung up, I just sat there grinning like an idiot for a solid minute. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. About the system confirming what I'd been saying all along. That I wasn't the crazy one. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't the villain. That night, I decided to make one last quiet move before the meeting. I called a friend of mine from college, Nate, who now works in IT security. I asked him, half joking, how hard it would be to save a permanent offline copy of Ryan's posts in case he tried to delete them later. Not hard at all, Nate said, laughing. Send me the links. I'll archive everything for you. Within an hour, he'd sent me a folder with timestamped PDFs of every post, comment, and even Ryan's GoFundMe page, complete with the donation list. Thanks, man, I said. No problem, Nate replied. But what's all this about? I paused, then said simply, let's just say I'm making sure the truth survives what's coming next. By Friday, I was ready. My laptop bag was packed, my documents were printed, and my mind was sharper than it had been in months. But then something unexpected happened. Mom called. Her voice was softer this time, almost hesitant. Trevor, honey, I'm glad you're coming Sunday. I really want us to work this out. Me too, I said carefully. There was a pause, then she added, just try not to make it a big scene, okay? Ryan's been under so much stress. I don't want this to turn into a shouting match. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Don't worry, Mom. I'm not planning to shout. And I wasn't lying. Because I had a different plan entirely. I spent Saturday morning preparing for every possible scenario. If they tried to guilt me, I had the receipts of everything I'd paid for over the past year. If they tried to claim Ryan was entitled to half the account, I had the statements proving I'd contributed far more. If Ryan tried to play the victim, I had his own words, in writing, showing he knew exactly what he was doing. That afternoon, I even stopped by a local cafe and ordered a box of pastries to bring with me Sunday. Not as a peace offering, but as a subtle way to show I wasn't coming to grovel. I was calm, collected, and entirely on my own terms. That night, as I sat in my apartment, the folder of evidence neatly stacked on the table beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt since before this whole mess began. Control. Ryan might have the family's sympathy, he might have the louder voice, but I had the truth. And soon, everyone was going to see it, whether they wanted to or not. As I turned off the lights and got ready for bed, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from Ryan. Can't wait to see what stunt you pull tomorrow. Hope you're ready to apologize in front of everyone. I stared at the screen, then locked my phone without replying. Oh, I was ready. But it wasn't going to be the apology he expected. Sunday came, and with it a strange, electric calm. I woke up earlier than I needed to, brewed coffee, and sat by the window for a long time just watching the light spill across the street. Normally, I'd have been dreading this meeting, imagining every possible way it could go wrong. But this time, I was ready. I dressed simply, nothing flashy, but put together enough to send a message. I wasn't here as the scolded younger brother. I was here as someone who deserved to be taken seriously. I packed up my folder, tucked my laptop into my bag, and grabbed the box of pastries I'd bought the day before. When I pulled up to my parents' house, there were already several cars in the driveway. My chest tightened for a moment, a flicker of nerves, but then I took a deep breath, grabbed my things, and walked up the front steps. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. Trevor, she said with a strained smile, her eyes darting to the pastry box. You didn't have to bring anything. I wanted to, I said evenly, stepping inside. The living room was full. Dad, a few aunts and uncles, my grandparents, even Cousin Mark. And of course, Ryan and Jess, perched on the couch like they were about to receive an apology bouquet. Ryan looked tired, but the moment he saw me, his mouth twisted into a smug little smirk. Glad you decided to show up, he said, leaning back. I didn't answer. I just set the pastries on the coffee table, took my seat, and calmly pulled out my folder. For a few moments, there was silence, just the soft rustle of people settling into chairs. Then Mom cleared her throat. Trevor, we all wanted to talk about what's been happening, she said. Ryan has explained his side, and we think there's been a lot of misunderstanding and hurt feelings. We just want to move forward. I nodded slowly. I want that too, I said. But before we talk about moving forward, we need to talk about what actually happened. Ryan rolled his eyes. Here we go. I opened the folder and laid the first bank statement on the table. This is the joint account activity from the past year, I said calmly. As you can see, I made regular deposits, usually twice a month. Ryan's contributions were, let's just say, inconsistent. Because I was between jobs, Ryan snapped. I didn't rise to the bait. Regardless, I continued, flipping to the next page. 3 days before Ryan left for Europe, there was a withdrawal for $9,472. That withdrawal wiped out nearly the entire account balance, which I was entitled to. Ryan shot back. It's a joint account. That's how those work. Yes, I said, still calm. But what you're not entitled to do is take that money without informing the co-owner, then spend it on non-emergencies. And when I filed a fraud claim, the bank agreed. They've classified the withdrawals as unauthorized and are pursuing recovery of the funds. That got everyone's attention. A ripple went through the room. Dad stiffened, Mom's mouth opened slightly, and even Jess shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Ryan's face went red. You went to the bank? Yes, I said simply. Because you took money that didn't belong solely to you. And then, instead of apologizing or even having a conversation about it, you started posting about me online, painting me as the villain, asking strangers for donations while eating at Michelin-starred restaurants. I turned my laptop around and opened the folder Nate had made for me, clicking through screenshots of Ryan's posts one by one. The room was dead silent except for the faint clicking of the trackpad. Look at this one, I said quietly, zooming in on a paragraph where Ryan had written about being abandoned by his family. That post got over 200 comments. Do you know how many messages I got calling me heartless? Do you know how many people in this room called me, demanding I do the right thing? No one answered. Ryan was breathing hard now, his hands gripping his knees. You're making me look bad on purpose. No, I said, my voice like ice. You did that yourself. I'm just making sure everyone sees the full picture. I slid the last piece of paper across the table, a copy of the letter from the family lawyer, asking me to remove my name from the account. This, I said, was the final straw. Not only did you take the money, but Mom and Dad tried to strip me of any control over the account completely, effectively handing you a blank check. Dad opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I know you thought you were de-escalating the situation, but what you really did was tell me that my contributions, my hard work, meant nothing. That Ryan's feelings mattered more than my financial security. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then, slowly, I leaned back in my chair. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to yell. I just want everyone to understand that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't me being petty. This was theft. And I won't pretend it wasn't just to keep the peace. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my grandmother, who had been silent the whole time, let out a little gasp. Ryan, she said sharply, is this true? Did you really take that money? Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again. It's not that simple. It is that simple. I cut in, still calm. And that's when it happened, the thing I'd been waiting for. Ryan snapped. You think you're so perfect, don't you? He shouted, slamming his hand on the coffee table. Always acting like you're better than me, like your dad's favorite little soldier. You think working a boring 9-to-5 makes you the moral authority of this family. The words came out in a rush, bitter and ugly, and the longer he went on, the clearer it became to everyone in the room that this wasn't about the money. This was about years of resentment, jealousy, and entitlement boiling over. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I just sat there, letting him dig the hole deeper with every word. When he finally ran out of steam, the room was dead silent. All eyes were on him, not me. I closed my laptop slowly, slid it back into my bag, and stood. Thank you for proving my point, I said quietly. Then I turned to leave. And as I reached the doorway, I heard my grandmother's voice again, soft, but cutting through the silence like a knife. Ryan, I think you owe your brother more than just money. I didn't look back. I didn't go far. Just to the porch. The air outside was crisp and cool, the kind that clears your head. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, taking slow, steady breaths while voices rose inside the house. At first, it was just a low murmur, Mom trying to smooth things over, Dad saying something in that measured tone he uses when he's trying to be the reasonable one. Then I heard Ryan again, louder this time, his words tumbling over each other. She's taking his side now too? This is ridiculous. You're all just letting him humiliate me. I couldn't make out every response, but the tone had changed. The defensive energy was gone, replaced by something quieter, more serious. After a few minutes, Dad stepped outside. "Trevor," he said, his voice softer than it had been in weeks. "Would you come back in for a minute?" I hesitated, then nodded. When I stepped back into the living room, the mood was entirely different. Ryan was standing now, pacing near the fireplace, his face red and his jaw tight. Jess sat with her arms crossed, looking more uncomfortable than angry. Mom was wringing her hands, and Grandma was still sitting straight-backed on the edge of the couch, her eyes on me like she was seeing me for the first time. Dad cleared his throat. "Your grandmother wants to say something." Grandma stood, leaning on her cane for balance. "Ryan," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "you will transfer back every cent you took from that account. Every cent. And you will apologize to your brother, not just for the money, but for dragging his name through the mud." Ryan's mouth dropped open. "You can't be serious." "I am dead serious," she said, her tone like iron. "I have watched this family enable your behavior for years, and I have stayed quiet because I thought you would grow out of it. But this," she gestured at the papers still spread on the coffee table. "This was theft, plain and simple. And you tried to turn us all against Trevor to cover it up. Enough is enough." For a moment, Ryan looked like he might argue, but when he glanced around the room, he saw no one coming to his defense. Even Mom looked pale and shaken. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, grabbing his jacket. "You're all acting like I'm some kind of criminal." "You acted like one," Grandpa said gruffly from his recliner. "Now fix it." Ryan's jaw worked as he tried to come up with a retort, but none came. Finally, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames on the wall rattled. Jess stood awkwardly for a second, then followed him, mumbling something about needing to cool him down. The room was quiet after they left. Mom turned to me, her eyes wet. "Trevor, I'm sorry. We should have listened to you from the beginning." "You should have," I said gently, but not unkindly. Dad nodded. "We'll make sure the account stays locked down until the funds are returned. And I'll talk to Ryan privately. He needs to understand the gravity of this." I gathered my papers and laptop, sliding them back into my bag one by one. The room still felt heavy, but it was a different kind of heavy, like a storm that had just passed. As I reached the door, Grandma spoke again. "Trevor," she said, "you handled yourself with more grace than most people twice your age would have. I'm proud of you." Something in my chest loosened at those words. "Thanks, Grandma," I said quietly. When I stepped outside, Ryan was standing at the end of the driveway, his back to me. He turned when he heard the door close, his face still flushed with anger. "You think you won?" he snapped. I looked at him for a long moment, then shouldered my bag. "No," I said calmly. "I didn't win. I just stopped losing." And with that, I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving him standing there, speechless, as the house shrank in my rearview mirror. On the way home, my phone buzzed with an email notification from the bank. I glanced at it at a stoplight. A message confirming the recovery process had officially begun, with funds to be credited back to my account within the next 2 weeks. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I laughed. Not bitterly, not out of disbelief, but a real, relieved laugh. Because this time, the story ended on my terms. And as I pulled into my apartment complex, a thought crossed my mind, clear and sharp as glass. Next Thanksgiving, if Ryan wants a seat at the table, he'll have to buy his own chair. My name is Henry, I'm 32, and for as long as I can remember, I've carried the title of the broke one in my family. It wasn't just an occasional jab or light-hearted tease. It was a constant drumbeat in every gathering, every phone call, every holiday dinner. My parents, my siblings, even my extended family had a way of reminding me, directly or indirectly, that in their eyes I was the one who didn't measure up. My brother bought a car straight out of college. My sister got married in a lavish ceremony my parents helped pay for, and my cousins, well, they were the golden examples everyone loved to parade around. Meanwhile, I was the guy patching together jobs, saving pennies, and trying to build something of my own with almost no support. What stung the most wasn't the money itself. I learned to live with less and didn't mind working hard, but the mockery, the smirks, the whispered jokes, the pitying looks, those were harder to stomach. At my niece's birthday party, for example, when I showed up with a modest toy and a handmade card, my sister leaned over and said, "Oh, Henry, you always try your best. It's the thought that counts." She said it with a sugary smile, but her husband chuckled under his breath, and I caught the smirk my brother shot across the table. At another dinner, my dad raised his glass to toast my brother's promotion and added, almost as an afterthought, maybe one day Henry will figure it out too. The table laughed. I laughed with them, though inside, every word landed like a stone. For years, I kept quiet. I told myself that speaking up would only make things worse, that I'd look bitter or defensive. So I swallowed it, even as the resentment grew. I worked nights, picked up freelance jobs, invested what little I had into an idea no one believed in, and slowly, inch by inch, I built something. It wasn't glamorous at first. My clothes still came from discount racks, my car coughed and sputtered its way down the road, and I still had to turn down vacations because I couldn't afford them. But behind closed doors, my work started to pay off. A contract here, a deal there, and over time, the numbers in my bank account shifted. I didn't announce it. I didn't even hint at it. I wanted it to be mine, away from the constant judgment and comparison. The shift came the year I quietly bought a property. Nothing too flashy at first, just a house on the edge of town. It was bigger than any place I'd ever lived, with high gates and enough land to give me privacy. When my family heard, the questions poured in, wrapped in disbelief. Wait, how did you afford that? Are you renting? Oh, is it some kind of foreclosure deal? Their voices carried that same mocking tone, like they couldn't imagine me owning something of value without there being a catch. I brushed them off, gave vague answers, and kept working. They didn't know that the house was only the beginning. As time passed, I expanded. Land, investments, contracts. What they had once laughed at turned into something they couldn't quite ignore. But instead of congratulating me, they grew restless, uneasy. They wanted details, invitations, access. When I dodged their questions, they grew sharper. At one family gathering, my brother asked, half joking but not really, "So Henry, when are you going to let us crash at your big fancy place? Or is it members only?" My mother, sipping her wine, chimed in, "Don't be so secretive, Henry. Family should share. You wouldn't even have gotten anywhere without the values we raised you with." I smiled, said nothing, and poured myself another drink. That was when I realized the dynamic had shifted. They used to laugh at me because I had nothing, but now, their laughter had a nervous edge. They didn't understand what I was doing, and worse, they couldn't control it. For the first time, I had something they wanted, and that terrified them. The day it all came to a head was ordinary enough at first. I was at home, reading through some paperwork, when I heard the buzz at my front gate. My estate gates. I checked the monitor and nearly dropped my glass. There they were, my entire family. My parents, my siblings, their spouses, even a couple of cousins. They hadn't called, hadn't texted. They were just standing there, expectant, as though showing up uninvited to my property was the most natural thing in the world. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore them, to let them stew outside until they realized they weren't welcome. But another part of me, colder, sharper, saw something else. An opportunity. So I pressed the button, and the gates slowly opened. They came in like they owned the place. My brother slapped me on the back as though he'd been invited. My sister immediately started snapping photos, angling her phone to capture the size of the property behind me. My mom wrinkled her nose and said, "Well, it's nice. Not as warm as your sister's house, but nice." My dad, ever the showman, clapped his hands together and announced, "Look at our Henry. Finally made it." We knew he had it in him. The words rang hollow, like a performance for the group. I forced a smile, led them inside, and began pouring drinks. As I watched them settle into my living room, feet up on my furniture, voices loud, laughter filling the space, I felt something tighten in my chest. For years, they'd laughed at me, dismissed me, treated me like I was nothing. And now, here they were, sipping my whiskey, admiring the walls I paid for, pretending as though they'd always believed in me. They thought they were in control. They thought this was their victory, too. But they had no idea what was coming. I poured another round, set the glasses down, and slid a folder across the table. Their voices faltered as they noticed it. My brother, always the first to grab, reached for it and pulled it open. As his eyes moved across the page, the color drained from his face. My sister leaned over, frowned, then gasped. One by one, their smiles faded. The laughter stopped. The room fell silent. And I sat back, watching, saying nothing, my hands steady around my glass. That was the moment I had been waiting for. My brother's hand lingered on the papers, his eyes darting back and forth while his lips moved as though sounding out each line. My sister leaned in, her bracelets clinking against the table as she tried to snatch a better look. My parents didn't even bother hiding their impatience. My mother sighed loudly, muttering about how long it could possibly take to read a few sheets of paper, while my father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking like he already knew whatever was written there belonged to him somehow. "What is this supposed to mean?" my brother finally asked, his voice tight, more irritated than curious. He shoved the contract across the table toward me, though not before my sister pulled it back, scanning the lines herself. She didn't understand either, but I caught the flicker of unease in her eyes. "It means what it says," I replied evenly, lifting my glass to my lips. That wasn't enough for them. It never was. Within minutes, the room that had fallen silent buzzed again, but this time the laughter was brittle, sharp-edged. My mom leaned forward, tapping the contract with her finger. "Henry, dear, I don't know what game you're playing, but you don't need to show off in front of us. We're family. We'll always take care of you, no matter how confused you get with these business things." The words slid out like honey, but there was steel underneath them. She hadn't even read the fine print. She didn't need to. In her mind, everything of mine was theirs by default. My dad chuckled, low and gravelly. "Yeah, don't get too carried away, son. You've done well. Finally, but let's not pretend you're some kind of tycoon. You wouldn't even know where to start without our advice over the years." Advice. That was rich. Their advice had been years of reminders that I was a disappointment, of telling me to take safe jobs, mocking me when I refused to settle, acting like my persistence was stupidity. My sister set the folder down, her eyes darting toward the marble countertop in my kitchen. "Honestly, Henry, it's nice you finally got something to your name. I mean, it took long enough, right? But you could at least be generous with it. Family should share. My kids would love to come stay here for the summer. You wouldn't mind, right?" There it was, the pivot from dismissal to entitlement. Not even a pause in between. My brother jumped in before I could respond. "Actually, I've been thinking. This place has so much land. Henry, you're not even using half of it. You should let me build a workshop out back. I'd pay you, of course," he added quickly, but the way his grin spread told me he didn't mean a word of it. "It's just, keeping all this space to yourself feels kind of selfish, don't you think?" Selfish. That was the word they always circled back to. When I worked long hours, I was selfish for not coming to family dinners. When I didn't chip in for extravagant gifts for relatives, I was selfish for not contributing. And now, with everything I had built, I was selfish for not immediately handing it over. I stayed quiet, sipping my drink, and that silence only seemed to embolden them. My mom patted my knee, like I was still a child who didn't know better. "Henry, darling, don't overthink things. Your father and I can help manage everything. Estates, contracts, it's complicated stuff. You don't want to make mistakes, do you? Better to let us handle the hard parts." My father nodded, raising his glass. "Exactly. You've always had a good heart, Henry, but not the sharpest head. You need guidance. That's what family is for. Guidance." As though I hadn't navigated every obstacle on my own, while they sat back and laughed. My sister's husband, who had been quiet until now, piped up, his voice oily. "You know, Henry, if you really wanted to secure this place, you should think about adding us to the deed. Keep it in the family, so no outsiders swoop in if anything happens to you." He grinned at me like he was doing me a favor. The air in the room felt heavier with every word, every casual suggestion that my hard work was theirs to divide. I could feel that old familiar tightness in my chest, the same one I'd felt at every family dinner where I was the punchline. Only now, I wasn't the broke one sitting at the kids' table. Still, they didn't see it. Or maybe they did, and they thought they could twist it to their advantage. My mother stood, brushing imaginary lint from her dress, and wandered toward the window overlooking the grounds. "This view," she sighed, her voice dreamy. "It reminds me of those estates we used to visit when your father's company had retreats. You've really done well, Henry. I always said you had it in you." That was a lie. She had never said that. Not once. My father leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were conspiring together. "Look, son, I'll be straight with you. You've got something good here, but you're going to need us. Taxes, upkeep, security, it adds up. We can help lighten the load. You don't want this place to become a burden, do you?" I stared at him, my mind racing. A burden. That's what they wanted me to believe. That success was too heavy for me to carry alone, that without them, I'd collapse under the weight of it. The contract still sat on the table between us, its words etched into my mind. They hadn't bothered to understand it yet, too busy circling like vultures, each trying to stake their claim in what they assumed was already theirs. And as I listened to them talk, demand, dismiss, and manipulate, I realized something. They weren't just underestimating me anymore. They were making a mistake far greater than that. They were underestimating what I had become. The fire in my chest burned steady, calm now instead of chaotic. I had spent years swallowing their laughter, their judgment, their endless reminders that I was less. Now, as their voices filled my home, I felt the balance shifting. They had no idea what was written in that contract. Not yet. And I wasn't about to explain it to them. Not until the moment was right. My brother's laugh cut through the room like a blade, low at first, then louder as he leaned back in his chair. "You know what, Henry?" he said, tossing the contract onto the table like it was a menu he didn't care to order from. "You're not fooling anyone with these papers. You've probably just copied some online template to make yourself feel important." The others chuckled, not because they understood, but because they followed his lead. My sister smirked, reaching for her glass. "Exactly. If this were something real, Henry, you wouldn't be hiding it. You'd have told us long ago. But no, you're still playing games, trying to prove you've, what, grown up." She gestured around the room. "It's cute, but you're still you. You can't rewrite who you are." My mother nodded in approval, always quick to back whichever child made me look small. "They're right, Henry. All this secrecy isn't healthy. You've always been so sensitive about money. Maybe it's time to let go of that pride and admit you need us. We're your family. You'll only get so far without us." And then, like they had planned it, came the moment that turned everything in my chest into fire. My dad rose from his chair, walked over to the contract, and without hesitation, dragged it closer to himself. "You know what, son?" he said, glancing at me with a smirk that had haunted me since childhood. "You don't need to waste your time with this nonsense. Why don't I take care of it?" Before I could stop him, he pulled a pen from his pocket and scribbled something across the last page. His handwriting was rough, impatient. He tapped the paper afterward and grinned. "There. Now it's official. Your old man is in the picture. Just the way it should be." I froze. My throat tightened. It was one thing for them to mock me, to belittle me, to circle around my success with greedy eyes. But this? Taking a document they hadn't read, hadn't understood, and signing it as though my life's work belonged to them? My sister's eyes lit up as she leaned in to see what he'd written. "Dad, did you just sign it?" she gasped, like it was a victory for her too. "Oh, that's brilliant. Now it's legally binding, right? That means we're all in." Her husband chimed in quickly. "Exactly. It keeps everything safe. Henry doesn't need to worry about carrying this burden alone anymore." Burden. Again that word. My brother, emboldened, reached over and scrawled his name under my father's, laughing as though it was the funniest joke of the year. "If we're doing this, let's do it properly. Don't want Henry stuck running around with no one to protect him." He leaned back with a satisfied grin, his arms stretching along the back of the couch like a man who had just claimed territory. My hands trembled, but not with fear. With rage. Cold, controlled rage. I clenched the glass in my hand, every muscle in my body tightening as the years of mockery and dismissal replayed in my head. The cheap toy I'd been ridiculed for bringing to my niece's party. The toasts at dinners where I was the punchline. My mother patting my knee like I was still a child. And now, my own father and brother writing their names across my contract as if everything I had built existed for them to take. They thought this was theirs. They thought I was still that boy sitting quietly at the corner of the table, swallowing every insult, pretending their laughter didn't sting. They thought I wouldn't stop them. My sister picked up the folder again, her face flushed with excitement now instead of scorn. "This is good, Henry. Really good. You'll thank us later. We'll make sure this estate stays in the family. You don't need to carry all this alone. It's better this way." I stared at her, my voice finally breaking through the haze in my head. Calm, steady, but sharp. "You don't even know what you've just signed." The room went quiet again, but this time, not with awe. With confusion. My father chuckled, shaking his head like I was being dramatic. "Stop trying to scare us, Henry. You're still the same boy who couldn't pay his rent without calling us for help. Don't play games. We're protecting you from yourself. My mother folded her arms, her lips pressed tight. Don't talk to your father that way. He knows what's best. We all do. You should be grateful we're stepping in. Grateful. The word echoed inside me, twisting like a knife. They expected me to thank them for mocking me, for dismissing me, for signing their names on something that wasn't theirs. I looked down at the contract, their messy signatures scrawled across the page. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not the kind of snap that makes you reckless. No, it was quieter, sharper, colder than that. It was the snap of a man who finally realizes he's not the weak one anymore. I leaned back, setting my glass down with care, my eyes sweeping over each of their faces. The smug grins, the expectant stares, the certainty that they had won. They didn't know it yet, but they had just given me everything I needed. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Not the forced smile they had seen at countless dinners, but a genuine one. One they couldn't understand. Not yet. I don't remember much of what was said after that moment, only the feeling. That hollow pit opening in my chest as I stared at the page, their sloppy signatures bleeding across lines they hadn't even bothered to read. It was like watching someone walk into your house, put their feet up on your table, and declare, "This is mine now." They carried on as if nothing had happened. My dad poured himself another drink. My brother started telling a story about his latest business idea, while motioning toward my backyard like he was already planning where he'd build his workshop. My sister wandered down the hall without asking, peeking into rooms like a realtor inspecting property. My mom drifted between them all, a queen surveying her new domain, occasionally glancing back at me as though expecting me to beam with gratitude. I didn't. I couldn't. I sat there, my glass heavy in my hand, feeling the weight of years pressing down all at once. Every insult, every dinner where I was the joke, every time they reminded me that I was less than them, it all collapsed into this moment. I excused myself quietly, slipping into my office and closing the door behind me. The sound of their laughter and chatter filtered through the walls, muffled but relentless. I leaned against the desk, staring at nothing, my mind spinning. This was supposed to have been different. I had imagined it 100 times, what it would be like to finally have them see me, to walk into a room without being the punchline, to have the kind of success they couldn't ignore. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would look at me and see the man I'd become, not the boy they'd mocked. But even now, sitting in the house I had built with my own hands, they didn't see me. They saw opportunity. And that realization cut deeper than any insult ever had. I should have stormed back into that room, ripped the contract from the table, told them to get out and never come back. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed there in the quiet, my hands gripping the edge of the desk until my knuckles went white. Because beneath the anger, there was still that old familiar ache. The ache of wanting their approval. The ache of realizing I was never going to get it. For the next hour, I let them roam my house like it was theirs. My brother's laugh boomed down the hall. My sister's heels clicked against the hardwood as she inspected each room. My mother's voice floated above it all with little remarks about the decor, a bit too modern for my taste, but fine. Like her opinion carried weight here. I sat there in silence, letting it wash over me, letting myself feel small again for the last time. Because in that silence, the fire returned. Not the reckless blaze of anger, but something steadier, controlled, precise. I thought of every time they had called me selfish, every time they had told me I needed them, every smirk across a dinner table. And now, I thought of their signatures, sprawled across that contract. They thought it was their victory. I realized it was my weapon. When they finally called me back into the living room, I put on the same smile I'd worn for years, the one that never reached my eyes. My sister was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, already posting pictures of the estate to social media. My brother was leaning back, his arm thrown over the chair like he owned it. My dad raised his glass toward me, his smirk as smug as ever. "You've done well, son," he said, as though the words were a gift. "And with us here, you'll keep doing well. Family looks after its own." Family. I nodded, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. "Of course," I said softly, my voice steady. "Family always comes first." They smiled satisfied. They thought I'd given in, that I had accepted their claim. And in a way, I had. But not in the way they imagined. That night, long after they had left, I sat alone at the table, the contract still lying there under the dim light. Their signatures stared back at me, arrogant and careless. I traced the ink with my finger, my mind already working. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. But no one knew it yet. Not them. Not even me. Fully. Not until the plan began to form in the quiet corners of my thoughts. For now, I let the silence hold me. I let myself feel the weight of what they'd done. The betrayal. The dismissal. The theft. I let it carve its place inside me, not as a wound, but as a reminder. Because the next time they walked through my gates, things would be different. And I would make sure they never forgot it. The weeks after that visit were some of the quietest of my life, yet also the loudest inside my own head. Every time I walked past the living room table, I saw that contract sitting there, their arrogant signatures staring back at me. For a while it hurt. The ink felt like proof that no matter what I built, my family would always try to claim it, reshape it, bend it into something that served them. But slowly, that sting transformed. The paper stopped feeling like a wound and began to feel like a map, a reminder of where I'd been and where I needed to go. I buried myself in work. Not the frantic, desperate kind of work I had once done to prove myself, but something calmer, sharper. I stopped chasing scraps and started negotiating real deals. I turned down offers that would have tied me up with too many strings, and I chose partners who valued discretion over bragging rights. Money flowed in, not all at once, but steadily, like a river finding its course. Every check I deposited, every signature I placed on a real contract that wasn't scrawled over by my family, felt like another brick in a wall I was building between me and them. The estate began to change, too. I invested in it, expanded it. Landscapers shaped the grounds, architects added wings, security companies reinforced the gates and cameras. The house that had once felt too big for me alone suddenly felt like it was growing into me. It became a fortress, not just of stone and steel, but of resolve. Every upgrade wasn't just for comfort, it was a statement. This was mine. Word began to spread outside of my family. Business acquaintances who had once dismissed me as just starting out began seeking me out instead. A few even admitted, quietly, that they had underestimated me. That meant more to me than any false praise from my parents ever could. And yet, even as the world shifted, my family didn't. They still called occasionally, usually with some thinly veiled excuse. My sister rang one afternoon, her voice syrupy sweet. "Henry, darling, my kids have been dying for a change of scenery. Wouldn't it be lovely if they spent the summer at your estate? They'd hardly take up any space." I said no, calmly, politely, but firmly. The silence on the other end was almost satisfying. My brother tried next. "Hey, man, I've been thinking. You've got that land out back, right? Perfect spot for my workshop. Tell you what, I'll handle the building costs. It'll even raise your property value. Win-win." I told him no, too. He laughed like I was joking, then grew serious when I didn't waver. His voice hardened, his words clipped. "You're being selfish, Henry. Don't forget who's always been there for you." I hung up before he could finish. Even my parents tried, in their way. My mom called one evening, her tone laced with false concern. "Henry, dear, managing an estate is a lot. Your father and I worry about you. You don't want to get in over your head, do you? Why don't you let us come by, help keep things in order?" I thanked her for the thought and told her it wasn't necessary. The silence that followed was telling. Each time I refused them, a new kind of strength settled into me. For so long, I'd been the boy who kept quiet, who swallowed the insults, who laughed along to hide the sting. But with every no, I felt less like that boy and more like the man I'd become. The man who didn't need their approval, their guidance, their false sense of family. Meanwhile, my success grew. Contracts doubled, then tripled. I hired staff, not a huge team, but people I trusted. The estate that had once echoed with emptiness now hummed with life, not from family who took without giving, but from people who believed in my work, who respected what I had built. I remember one evening, walking the grounds alone, the sunset spilling gold across the gardens. For the first time in years, I felt steady, not triumphant, not boastful, just steady, like I had finally found a rhythm that belonged only to me. But even as the world outside flourished, the shadows of my family lingered. They hadn't forgotten that day at the gates. They hadn't forgotten the contract. They hadn't forgotten the taste of what they thought they almost had. And deep down, I knew they would be back. The only question was when. And when they did return, I would be ready. The turning point came on a morning that started like any other. I was sitting in my office with a cup of coffee, the contract still tucked in its drawer like a loaded weapon, when my lawyer, an older man named Whitaker who had guided me quietly through the last few years, called. He wasn't the type to waste words, which is why the first thing he said caught my full attention. "Henry," he began, his voice calm but deliberate. "I've been reviewing the documents you asked me to keep on file. That contract your family signed. Did you realize what they actually gave you?" My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Whitaker chuckled softly, though it wasn't unkind. "They thought they were taking something from you. But what they signed, Henry, it wasn't an addition. It was a release. By scribbling their names, they waived any potential claim they could have ever made on your estate. It's airtight. You now hold written proof that, should they ever contest your ownership or your wealth, their signatures themselves dissolve their standing." I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of his words pressing down like a stone. For weeks, that contract had felt like a symbol of their arrogance, of how they had mocked me even in my own home. Now, it was something else entirely. A weapon. Whitaker must have sensed my silence, because he added, "Henry, this is one of those rare moments where life hands you leverage on a silver platter. Use it wisely." After we hung up, I pulled the folder out of the drawer and looked at it again. My father's messy scrawl, my brother's careless flourish, both written with the smug certainty that they had claimed me, claimed my work, claimed my home. And all along, they had handed me the very rope I would use to tighten the boundaries around my life. For the first time in years, I didn't just feel steady, I felt powerful. And as if on cue, the calls began again. My sister this time, her voice unusually soft, dripping with false kindness. "Henry, I've been meaning to ask, have you thought about hosting Christmas at your place this year? It would mean so much to the family. The house is so big, it's perfect for everyone. We could even invite extended relatives. Imagine the memories." I smiled into the phone, though she couldn't see it. "I'll think about it," I said, because now I wasn't just reacting to them. I was planning. The more I leaned into my work, the more doors opened. Invitations to exclusive business circles, whispers of partnerships with names my family would recognize instantly. I didn't flaunt it, not yet, but I kept mental notes. Every contract signed, every piece of land acquired, every door opened widened the gap between who I had been and who I was becoming. The estate itself grew into a symbol. I invested in renovations not just for comfort, but for presence. The gates were taller now, reinforced with steel. The drive was lined with manicured trees, the fountains in the courtyard lit at night. Anyone who entered knew immediately this wasn't just a house. It was a statement. My staff, loyal and discreet, became an extension of that power. They knew who to let in and who to keep out. They knew when to serve and when to disappear into the background. They understood, without me needing to explain, that this home was both sanctuary and stage. But what truly shifted things was when I secured a deal with an old acquaintance of my father's. A man who had once dismissed me as the kid fumbling with ideas, now signed a contract with me that not only expanded my reach, but placed me directly in circles my family revered. The kind of circles they had always boasted about belonging to, even when their influence was fading. It wasn't just money anymore. It was reputation, standing, authority. And with that authority came the realization I could set the terms. The next time my brother called, trying once again to pitch his workshop idea, I didn't hang up. Instead, I listened, patiently, let him believe, for a moment, that I was considering it. And when he finally paused, waiting for my approval, I simply said, "Put it in writing." There was a long silence on the other end. "What?" "Draw up the paperwork." I repeated, my tone even. "I don't move without contracts." He laughed nervously, unsure if I was joking. But I wasn't. And he knew it. For once, the balance had shifted. I began imagining scenarios, rehearsing conversations, picturing the exact way their expressions would change when the trap I was building finally closed. The contract they had signed was already leverage, but I wanted more. I wanted them to see, truly see, that the boy they mocked, the broke one, was gone. And in his place stood a man who didn't just survive their ridicule, but thrived in spite of it. I wanted them to walk through my gates again, but this time, it would be on my terms. So I waited, patiently, carefully, and as each week passed, the pieces moved into place. They thought they had written me off years ago. They thought they had claimed me when they signed that contract. They had no idea they had only set the stage for what was coming. The invitation went out 2 weeks before Christmas. Just a simple card, white with gold lettering, sent to every member of my immediate family. Christmas dinner at the estate, 6 p.m. No flowery message, no personal notes, just the time, the place, and my name at the bottom. I could almost hear their excitement buzzing through the phone calls that followed. My mother called first, her voice practically gleaming. "Oh, Henry, how thoughtful of you. Finally bringing the family together like this. It's about time you realize traditions matter." My father followed, less sentimental but more direct. "We'll be there. I'll bring the wine. You don't have to worry about the little things." My sister texted me photos of dresses she was choosing between for the evening, asking for my opinion, though she didn't really care. My brother sent a message that simply read, "Looking forward to seeing the place again. Maybe we can talk business afterward." I didn't respond to any of it beyond polite, clipped acknowledgments. I wanted their anticipation to build. I wanted them to walk through my gates believing they were coming to claim something. That was the only way they'd feel the full weight of what was about to happen. The night arrived cold and clear, the air crisp enough that every breath turned white. The estate was lit beautifully, fountains glowing, lanterns lining the drive, candles flickering in the windows. When their cars rolled up the drive, I watched from the balcony above the grand hall, the same way a host might watch guests arriving for a play. And in a sense, that's exactly what it was. They entered with the same casual arrogance as before. My sister's children ran ahead, their voices echoing off the marble floors, while she called after them with mock scolding. My brother slapped me on the back the moment he stepped through the door, his grin wide and unearned. "Looks good, Henry. Real good. Almost like you knew what you were doing all along." Almost. Dinner was laid out in the dining hall, long tables draped in linen, glasses polished to shine under the chandelier. The food was impeccable, prepared by staff who moved silently, professionally, disappearing before anyone had a chance to notice them. My family sat down, plates filled, drinks poured, laughter spilling like they had already won something. I let them talk. I let them toast. I let my father raise his glass and say, "To Henry, finally finding his place." And when their glasses clinked, I placed the folder on the table. The same folder. The same contract. The room stilled. "Again with this?" My brother scoffed, reaching for it as though it was already his. "Henry, come on, you're dragging this out. What's the point? Read it," I said simply, my voice calm, almost quiet. They laughed at first, exchanging glances like I was performing some tired joke. But I didn't laugh. I didn't move. I only watched. Curiosity got the better of my sister. She slid the folder closer, flipped it open, and began to read. Her eyes moved slower this time, the lines sinking in deeper. Her smirk faded, replaced by a small crease in her brow. My father leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the words. My brother grabbed it impatiently, scanning it himself, his face darkening with each line. This can't be right," my father said, his voice sharp, defensive. "This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, but it is," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "You remember that day you all came here uninvited, poured my drinks, and decided to scrawl your names across something you hadn't read? You thought you were signing yourselves into my future. You weren't." My brother slammed the folder shut. "This is a trick. Some legal game. It doesn't mean anything." "On the contrary," I said, sliding a second folder across the table. This one thicker, stamped with Whitaker's seal. "That contract, combined with this, filings, notarizations, confirmations, means you've officially relinquished any potential claim to my estate, my assets, my company, and any future holdings tied to my name. It's ironclad. Every signature you gave that day was a gift to me." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. My sister's face flushed crimson. You set us up." I tilted my head, my smile small, deliberate. "No, I gave you a choice. You made it." My father tried to bluster, his voice rising. "We're your family. You think some piece of paper can change that?" I met his eyes evenly. "It already has." My mother whispered something then, so soft I almost missed it. "You planned this." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was written all over my face, in the calmness of my voice, in the steady way I held their gaze without flinching. They had walked into my house, years of arrogance trailing behind them, and handed me the power I now wielded. And tonight, for the first time, they realized it. The weight of the room pressed down, their laughter gone, their plates untouched, their drinks forgotten. Their eyes flicked between one another, searching for reassurance, for someone to tell them it wasn't true. But it was. And I sat there in the silence, letting them drown in it. The silence didn't last long. It cracked first with my brother, who shoved back his chair so violently it scraped against the floor. His face was red, his voice loud enough to rattle the chandelier. "This is ridiculous, Henry. You think some fancy lawyer and a stack of papers make you better than us? We're your blood. You can't just cut us out like strangers." I didn't move. "I didn't cut you out," I said evenly. "You signed yourselves out." My sister jumped in next, her voice shrill, trembling between anger and panic. "You tricked us. You knew what you were doing that day. You set a trap. This isn't fair. You can't hold us to it." I raised an eyebrow. "Unfair? You came into my home uninvited, poured my drinks, and signed a document you never bothered to read. You laughed at me as you did it. I didn't force your hand. You handed me everything." Her husband tried to recover ground, speaking in that oily, calculated tone I'd always hated. "Henry, listen, this can be resolved. We don't need to fight. Family should stick together. We can renegotiate, draw up something new, tear this old thing up and start fresh." "Right." I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping. "Wrong." My father finally spoke, his face tight with fury, the mask of control slipping. "Don't do this, Henry. Don't make an enemy of your own family. You'll regret it." I met his eyes without blinking. "No," I said quietly. "I regretted staying silent for 32 years. That regret ends tonight." The weight of those words seemed to settle on the table heavier than any contract could. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for her glass, her voice breaking as she whispered, "We were only trying to help." I almost laughed, but the sound stuck in my throat. Help? They had mocked me, dismissed me, used me, and when they saw what I'd built, they tried to claim it as their own. If that was their version of help, I wanted nothing to do with it. I stood then, pushing my chair back calmly, deliberately. "This dinner is over. My staff will see you out." They erupted at once, my sister crying, my brother shouting, my father swearing under his breath, my mother pleading with me not to be so cold. Their words overlapped into a storm of anger, panic, and disbelief. But I didn't respond. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked toward the balcony doors and opened them, letting the cold night air pour into the hall. One by one, my staff approached, firm but polite, guiding my family toward the exit. My brother tried to resist, but 2 guards stepped forward, and he thought better of it. My sister sobbed into her husband's shoulder, muttering about betrayal. My mother paused at the threshold, her eyes wide and wet, whispering, "Henry, please, we're your family." I looked at her for a long moment, the woman who had raised me, who had laughed at me, who had stood silent when the others mocked me. And I said the only thing that felt true. "No, you're not." The door shut behind them. The echo of it rolled through the empty hall, leaving me alone in the glow of the chandelier. I stood there for a while, listening to the silence, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. For years, they had called me the broke one, the failure, the disappointment. Now they were gone, and I was free. I poured myself one final drink, raised the glass toward the quiet room, and spoke the last words they would never hear. To family. And then, with a steady hand, I drank every drop. The night outside was cold, but inside, for the first time in my life, I felt warm. This all started years ago, but honestly, it was the moment that broke me. I never thought it would come to this, but here I am, writing this on a quiet, late night, unable to sleep, still angry. Maybe it'll help to get it out. I was always the quiet one in the family. Not by choice, just by circumstance. My brother was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He was smart, charming, and a natural athlete. He was the one who got all the praise, all the attention. Meanwhile, I was the one who never seemed to be enough. We grew up in a house where everything was about appearances. My parents were always focused on what others thought. If they could throw a nice dinner party, wear the right clothes, and have the perfect family, that's what mattered most. We weren't poor, but we weren't exactly rich either. My parents worked hard, but there was always a sense of competition among us, especially between me and my brother. He was the one who could talk his way out of anything. I was the one who kept my head down, did my homework, and stayed out of trouble. That should have been enough, right? I thought if I just stayed quiet and did my part, they would notice me eventually. But they didn't. And the birthdays. It started when I was about 10. My parents would always go all out for my brother. Big cakes, huge presents, balloons, you name it. For me, a quiet dinner, maybe a card, and a happy birthday from the family. It wasn't that I was asking for the world. I didn't want a huge celebration. I just wanted to feel like I mattered. But as time went on, I got used to it. I figured maybe they were just busy, or maybe they didn't know how to celebrate me. That was until my 18th birthday. It was the first time I really thought maybe things would change. I was turning an adult. I was finishing high school, heading off to college soon, and I had done everything they asked of me. So, I thought, maybe this year will be different. I remember walking into the living room that morning, feeling excited, expecting at least a little more attention. There was no cake, no presents, no decorations. My mom was on the phone with someone. My dad was tinkering around in the garage, as usual. My brother was nowhere to be found. I didn't say anything at first, but when my mom hung up, I asked quietly, "Are we doing anything for my birthday today?" She looked at me, paused, and then said, "Oh, right. It's today, isn't it? We'll get you something later. We're just waiting for your brother to get back from his game. He's got a big tournament today, you know." My heart sank. That was the first real sting of feeling invisible. A simple happy birthday would have sufficed. A little recognition. But no, my brother's game was more important. And I let it slide. After all, I was used to it by now. But this time, something inside me snapped. I spent the rest of the day by myself, reflecting on everything. The little moments that added up to something bigger, the times I felt like I was living in his shadow. That night, my brother returned home, bragging about how well he'd done at the tournament. My parents, of course, made a huge deal of it. I sat there, quietly, not wanting to make a scene, but I couldn't help it. I finally said, "I guess I'll just make my own birthday cake then." The look on my mother's face was one of pure confusion. "What? Why would you do that?" And that's when I realized. No one cared. Not really. It wasn't that they didn't love me, but it was clear they weren't interested in celebrating my achievements. They were too wrapped up in my brother's. From that point forward, birthdays became a sore subject. I stopped expecting anything from them, stopped hoping for some kind of attention or recognition. After a few years of disappointment, I learned to just keep my head down and move on. But I kept track, in my mind, of each year they skipped. Each time they ignored me, and each time my brother was celebrated. Fast forward to this year, my 25th birthday. I figured I had learned not to expect anything, so I kept it low-key. My brother was visiting from out of town. He just moved back after a stint working abroad, and my parents had planned this big family dinner to welcome him back. They told me about it a few days ahead of time, and honestly, I wasn't too excited. But it was family, so I showed up. I went through the motions, put on a smile, tried to ignore the little pang of disappointment in my chest. I arrived at the house, greeted by the usual scene. Fancy dinner spread out, my parents already seated, my brother laughing with my mom. I smiled, said my hellos, and sat down. I had already come to terms with the fact that my birthday wasn't going to be a big deal. I didn't even expect a cake. But then, as we sat down to eat, I did something I hadn't done in a while. I smiled, trying to make light of the situation, and asked, "Did you remember my birthday?" The room fell silent for a moment. My mother blinked, looking confused. "Oh, was that today?" she said, her voice so casual, so indifferent. My heart dropped into my stomach. She paused for a moment, then quickly added, "We're celebrating your brother's new haircut." My brother, sitting beside her, smirked, clearly pleased with the attention. The worst part? He looked at me, grinning like he was the center of the universe, as if he didn't even register how hurtful that was. I stared at my mother, then at my brother. My throat tightened, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I stood up, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me, and without a word, I turned and walked away. I could feel my heart sinking with each step. It wasn't about the haircut. It wasn't even about my birthday. It was about the fact that I had been overlooked again, ignored. And somehow, in that moment, I realized I'd had enough. A few days later, I sent them a message. A simple one, but it was loaded with all the emotion I'd been holding in for years. I'm not sure what I expected them to do with it, but I needed them to see how it felt. How it had felt for so long. How much it hurt. I didn't hear back immediately. But then, my phone buzzed one afternoon. My mother had sent a text. I opened it, and my heart stopped. She said, "We need to talk." The message was short, but the tone was unmistakable. They'd seen it. They'd read what I wrote. And now, they were going to have to deal with the consequences. To be honest, a part of me was hoping they would just leave it alone, that they would ignore it like they had ignored me for all those years. But I knew they wouldn't. I knew the moment they saw my message, they would feel obligated to do something about it. That's just how my family worked. If it wasn't about appearances, it didn't matter. But if it was about fixing the image they had of themselves as good parents, then they would act. I let a whole day go by, mostly to let my emotions settle. I didn't want to snap at them in anger. I wanted to be calm when I responded. But by the time I finally replied, I could feel the tension building inside me. I sent a simple message. I don't need a big celebration or grand gestures. I just want to know I matter. I've spent years being ignored while everything has been about him, and I can't take it anymore. I want to be seen for once. I hit send and then immediately regretted it. Was I being too harsh? I had always been the quiet one, the one who never spoke up. But now, after everything, I was done. I needed to be heard, even if it meant sounding dramatic or making them uncomfortable. I knew they were going to be shocked by my words, but maybe that was what it would take to finally make them see me. The response came quicker than I expected. My mom's text read, "We didn't realize it meant that much to you. We've always loved you, but you've always been so quiet about things. We thought you didn't want the attention." I could feel the guilt in her words, and maybe a little defensiveness too. She had always been the type to defend herself, especially when she thought she had done no wrong. But I didn't care about that. I didn't care about the excuses. This wasn't about her feeling guilty or explaining herself. This was about me, finally standing up for myself after years of being ignored. I thought about replying, but I didn't. I was tired of talking, tired of explaining myself. So, I left it at that and waited. A couple of days passed before my dad reached out. Unlike my mother, he wasn't as quick with the apologies. He wasn't one to apologize for anything unless it was absolutely necessary, and even then, it would be more of a sorry you feel that way kind of apology. His message was shorter, more to the point. "We've been busy. You know how things are. Let's talk when we're all together." That irritated me. Busy? Busy doing what? I had spent years silently wishing they would make time for me. And now, they were trying to brush it all off because of how busy they were. I was done. I couldn't pretend anymore. I didn't reply to him either. But that night, something unexpected happened. My brother called me. At first, I didn't even want to pick up. I wasn't ready for a conversation with him. He was the one who had always been the golden child, the one who got all the attention. I had no interest in hearing his usual smugness, but I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. I picked up the phone. "What do you want?" I said flatly. There was silence for a moment, and then he spoke, his tone softer than usual. I didn't know it was that bad," he said. "Mom told me what you wrote. I didn't realize you felt that way." It was the first time in years that I'd heard any real acknowledgement from him. I couldn't help but feel a little taken aback. Was he genuinely apologetic? Or was this just another one of his attempts to play the good guy and keep up the family image? "You didn't know?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've known, and so has everyone else. I've been invisible for years." He paused. "I don't think it was intentional, though. I mean, I'm sorry, okay." I could feel the sincerity in his words, but I didn't trust it. He'd been getting everything for so long that I couldn't just let this one apology change everything. "It's not just about saying sorry," I told him. "It's about understanding. It's about seeing me. Really seeing me." Another silence hung in the air. My brother wasn't good at handling anything serious. He liked to brush things off, keep things light. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it this time. After a long pause, he finally sighed. "I get it. I do. But can we just talk about it more in person?" I almost said no. I didn't want to be near any of them right now. But then, I thought about it. This could be my chance. Maybe, just maybe, this was my opportunity to finally confront the family, to make them understand how I felt. I took a deep breath and decided to give him a chance. "Fine," I said. "We can talk. But don't expect me to forgive everything overnight." "Okay," he replied. "I'll talk to Mom and Dad, and we'll figure out a time." I hung up the phone feeling a mix of emotions, frustration, uncertainty, and maybe just a tiny glimmer of hope. Maybe this would be the breakthrough I needed. Maybe this time, they would finally understand. A few days later, we all agreed to meet at my parents' house. It wasn't the family dinner I had hoped for, but it was an opportunity. And I was determined not to let this slip through my fingers. When I arrived, my parents were already seated, waiting for me. My brother was there too, and it was clear they had all discussed this behind closed doors. The atmosphere was tense, more so than usual. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what was coming. This wasn't going to be easy, but I had reached a point where I couldn't hold back anymore. As I sat down, my mom started, her voice unusually calm. "We're sorry, really. We didn't mean to make you feel invisible. But what do you want us to do about it?" My father chimed in. "We can't change the past, but we're here now. What's it going to take for things to get better?" I looked at them all, the weight of years of hurt in my chest, and I knew this was the moment that would either fix everything or break it completely. I stared at them, my mind racing. The room was quiet, too quiet. The tension was palpable, and I could feel the weight of years of neglect and disappointment pressing down on me. They were waiting for me to say something, to tell them what they could do to fix it. But how could they fix something that had been broken for so long? I took another deep breath. "I don't want you to fix it," I finally said, my voice shaking slightly. "I don't need your apologies, or your gifts, or some big gesture. What I need is for you to see me. Really see me. I've spent my entire life in your shadows, watching you celebrate every little thing about him, and I've had nothing. Nothing." My mother's face fell, and I could see the guilt flicker across her features. She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up my hand, stopping her. "I'm tired of hearing sorry without any real change. I'm tired of being the one who quietly steps aside every time he gets the attention. When was the last time you asked about me, huh? Not just my grades or whether I was on track with my career, but me as a person." My dad shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. "It's not like that, honey. We've always tried to be there for you. You've always been so independent." "I wasn't independent," I snapped, my anger flaring up. "I was ignored. You never gave me the chance to need you because you were too busy worrying about him. You were too busy with his accomplishments to care about the things that mattered to me." I looked at my brother, who had been uncharacteristically silent through this entire exchange. His smirk was gone, replaced by a look of genuine confusion. I could tell he didn't get it. Maybe he didn't want to. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't going to hold back. "Do you know how many birthdays I've had where you forgot? Do you know how many times I've had to celebrate alone or pretend that it didn't hurt? And now, you're telling me that you're sorry. You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. You have to change." There was a long pause. My mom was on the verge of tears, and my dad was staring down at his hands. My brother was still looking at me like he was trying to understand what had just happened. I could tell he was confused, probably because he had never been on the receiving end of this. He had always been the one getting the attention, the praise, the approval. But I didn't care. I had nothing left to lose. "I don't want your pity," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I don't need you to feel sorry for me. What I want is for you to recognize me. For you to see that I'm just as deserving of love, attention, and respect as he is. I'm tired of always being second place. I've spent my whole life being second place." My brother finally spoke up, his voice hesitant. "I didn't know you felt like that. I really didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel like you were invisible. I never thought about it that way." I looked at him, my anger fading slightly. He seemed sincere, but that didn't mean everything was suddenly fixed. It was a start, but only a small one. "It's not just about you," I said, my tone softer now. "It's about all of you. You never noticed because you didn't want to notice. You were too caught up in your own little world to see that I was drowning in mine." My dad cleared his throat, leaning forward in his chair. "We never meant to hurt you. But I think we've been so focused on other things that we've forgotten how to prioritize what really matters. We'll work on it. We're not perfect, but we can try to do better." My mom wiped away a tear, looking at me with a mixture of regret and hope. "I know I haven't been the best mom to you. I thought I was doing everything right, but maybe I was too focused on what I thought you needed, instead of what you actually needed. I'm sorry, and I promise I'll do better." I took in their words, but I wasn't sure if I believed them. Do better didn't feel like enough after everything I had been through. But I wasn't sure what I expected either. Part of me wanted to hear them admit their mistakes, to truly own up to the years of neglect and favoritism. But I knew that wasn't realistic. They were never going to fully get it. It wasn't going to happen overnight. And part of me wondered if I was asking for too much. But even if they didn't fully understand, I wanted them to try. For once, I wanted them to try for me. I stood up, my chest tight, my emotions still raw but somehow lighter. "I'm going to leave now," I said, my voice steady. "I don't want this to drag out. I'll think about what you said, but I need some time to process all of this." "Of course, take all the time you need," my mom said softly, her voice trembling. We're here whenever you're ready to talk more. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything else. My brother stood up, too, looking conflicted. I really am sorry, okay? I want things to be better between us. I didn't respond. I couldn't respond. There was too much to say, too much hurt to unpack in one conversation. As I left their house, I felt a mix of emotions, exhaustion, anger, relief. Maybe this was the first step towards something better. Or maybe it was just another round of empty promises. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being heard. And that, at least, was something. I spent the next few days in a haze. My mind was a storm of conflicting emotions, anger, disbelief, sadness, but also a small, flickering hope. They had said the right things, and for a brief moment, it felt like things could change. But deep down, I wasn't sure. Could they really change? Could I trust them to finally recognize me? I didn't know the answer. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I was even ready to forgive them. That was the hardest part of all this. The idea of forgiving people who had hurt me for so long. It wasn't just a single mistake or oversight. This was a lifetime of me being overlooked, ignored, and pushed aside. So, despite their words, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were going to forget again. That, in a few weeks, they would go back to the same old pattern, and I'd be left feeling invisible once more. But then something happened. A week after that tense dinner, I received a message. It wasn't from my parents or my brother, but from a relative I hadn't heard from in a while, my aunt, actually. I wasn't sure why she had reached out to me, especially considering how little we'd communicated in recent years. The message read, "Hey, just wanted to let you know your parents and brother have been talking about you a lot lately. They're feeling really guilty about how things went down at the dinner. They've been discussing ways to make it up to you, and they want to know if you'd be open to meeting up with them. They're sorry for everything and are willing to do whatever it takes." I stared at the screen, the message feeling like a cruel joke. They're feeling guilty? It wasn't some magic switch they could flip, and suddenly everything would be okay. If they were really sorry, I thought, why was it just now coming up? Why did they only realize the extent of how I felt after they saw how I reacted? And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a simple case of "I'm sorry." This was a deep-rooted issue. It wasn't just my parents and brother that had to change, it was me, too. If I was going to fix this, I couldn't rely on them to carry all the weight. I needed to decide what I wanted for myself and how I was going to move forward, whether that meant forgiving them or cutting them out completely. I didn't respond to my aunt's message. Part of me wanted to go, wanted to hear them out, but another part of me was terrified that they hadn't really changed at all. What if this was just another round of empty promises? What if they never actually saw me, and they were only saying the right things because they felt guilty and worried about losing me? I had always been the type to avoid confrontation. I would let things fester, let them build up until I couldn't hold it in anymore. But this time, I couldn't do that. I had to make a decision, even if it wasn't an easy one. The next day, I saw my brother at a family gathering. He had a slightly sheepish look on his face, as if he wasn't sure how to approach me. I didn't know what to say to him. Could I even trust him? Had he really understood what I had said that night? Or was this just some passing guilt that would fade as quickly as it had appeared? "Hey," he said, hesitating before sitting next to me. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About everything. I really didn't know how bad it was. I guess I've always just assumed you were fine. You know? You never really made it clear that you were hurting." I nodded slowly. "I never made it clear because I didn't think you'd care." He winced at that. "I get it. And I really do feel bad about how everything went down. But I want to do better. I know it won't fix everything, but I want to start showing you that I care. I don't want you to feel invisible anymore." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But it felt like the same old cycle. How many times had I heard the same thing? How many times had they promised to do better, only for it to fall apart? "I'm not sure if I'm ready to believe you," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "You've had plenty of chances to change before, and it's never stuck." "I get that," he said, his voice quiet now. "But I'm asking for a chance to prove it. I'll do whatever it takes, even if it takes time. I don't want you to feel like this anymore." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw the sincerity in his eyes. Maybe it was naive to think this could be the turning point, but I couldn't deny that I wanted to believe him. Maybe it was time to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was time to take that step. But just as I was about to respond, I saw my parents walking in. They weren't close enough to hear our conversation, but I could feel their eyes on us. And that's when it hit me. None of this would be fixed in a single conversation. My family had a lot of work to do, and so did I. It wasn't just about a dinner or a missed birthday. It was about years of damage, years of emotional neglect. Look, I said, standing up suddenly. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I can forgive you all right now. But I do know that things can't stay like this. I'm not going to keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. My brother stood up too, his expression pleading. I get it. Just know that I'm here when you're ready. And I'll keep trying. I nodded, feeling a wave of exhaustion hit me. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive them yet, but at least I was starting to see that they were willing to try. Whether that would be enough, though, that remained to be seen. As I walked away from the gathering, my heart was heavy and my mind was full of questions. Had this been a turning point? Or was I just setting myself up for more disappointment? Only time would tell. But before I end this post, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How would you handle a situation like this? Am I asking too much from my family? Do I give them another chance? Or is it time to walk away for good? I'd love to hear what you think. I was never the golden child. That title belonged to my older brother, Jason, since the moment he was born. I don't even say that bitterly anymore. It's just a fact, like gravity or taxes. I'm Eric, 29 years old, and I've spent most of my life being the invisible one in a family that never made much room for me. If Jason got a B, it was he must have had a tough exam. If I got an A, it was, well, that's expected from someone who doesn't have a real job. And yeah, that was actually said once. At the dinner table, by my dad. My mom smiled softly and changed the subject like she always did. That's kind of the dynamic. Jason shines, dad praises, mom pacifies, and I quietly shrink a little more each year. I'm not some moody, brooding martyr, though. I've built a good life. A quiet life, but one that matters to me. I'm a software engineer, freelancing mostly, not flashy, not social media worthy, but stable. I live in a cozy one-bedroom apartment I actually own, drive a decent car I paid off early, and have a handful of friends who actually listen when I talk. And maybe because I never really got that at home, I value it more than anything else. I'm not flashy like Jason. He's a real estate agent with flashy suits, an Instagram full of gym selfies and leased BMWs, and a girlfriend who makes influencer reels of them kissing in matching outfits. My dad loves it. That's what success looks like, he said once while scrolling through one of Jason's reels, not even noticing I was in the room. But I'm not here to vent about every moment of my childhood that chipped away at my self-worth. I'm here to tell you what happened at my mom's 60th birthday dinner, the one that changed everything. It started like any other obligatory family gathering, a fancy restaurant I didn't pick, a group text I was added to last minute, and an unspoken assumption that I'd show up, smile, and stay quiet. I got there on time, gift in hand, a framed photo of me and mom from when I was 5, taken on one of the rare days she took me out alone. I had it restored and put in a simple but elegant walnut frame. It wasn't expensive, but it meant something. She smiled when she unwrapped it, maybe even got a little misty-eyed, but then Jason handed her a box, designer jewelry, of course, and suddenly the photo was quietly set aside like a receipt. Dinner went as expected. Jason held court with stories about his latest property deal, about networking with high-value clients, and Dad hung onto every word like it was gospel. I nodded along politely, chewing my overpriced steak in silence. I tried to talk to Mom at one point, ask her about the painting classes she mentioned she wanted to try, but before she could answer, Dad interrupted with, "Eric, don't you want to ask your brother how he closed on that Beverly Hills townhouse? You could learn a thing or two." I laughed, quietly. I've learned to do that, to swallow the sting, turn it into a sound that won't make things worse. I made a joke about needing to finish my piece first, and everyone chuckled, even if it was at me. Jason winked like he was in on something I wasn't. I don't think he even meant to be cruel. He never has to try. It just comes naturally. But then came the moment. The one that didn't sting. The one that punched. The waiter brought out the dessert, some kind of custom cake Jason's girlfriend had picked out, with edible gold leaf and Mom's name piped in perfect cursive. Everyone applauded like it was the opening ceremony of the Olympics. And then Dad stood up, wine glass in hand, clearing his throat dramatically like he was about to give a speech at the Oscars. "I just want to say," he began, already beaming at Jason, "how proud I am of this family, of how far we've come, especially of you, son." He raised the glass in Jason's direction. "You've become someone. You've built something, made us proud. You're everything a man should strive to be." Jason did his usual modest shrug, the kind that somehow still managed to look arrogant, and gave a little nod of appreciation. And then Dad turned to me. "And you?" he said, smiling like he was about to say something sweet. "Thank you for staying exactly where you belong." I blinked. For a second I thought I misheard him. But then I looked around and saw them all laughing. Mom gave one of her gentle, closed-lip smiles. Jason outright chuckled, and his girlfriend, whose name I still didn't know after a year, laughed so hard she nearly spilled her rose. I froze. My brain fired off every possible response, a sarcastic comeback, a dry thanks, maybe even getting up and leaving. But all I did was smile. A little too wide, a little too late. And I nodded. They didn't notice the smile didn't reach my eyes. They never do. I quietly called the waiter over, asked for the bill, paid the entire thing, tip included. Nearly $600. Nobody noticed. Or maybe they did and just assumed it was the least I could do for being the family disappointment. Then I stood, gently pushed my chair in, and said, "I've got an early meeting tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your night." Mom offered a week. "Thanks for coming, sweetheart." Dad just said, "Drive safe." Jason raised his glass again, like he was toasting me for the role I played, the background character in his success story. I walked out into the cold night air and sat in my car for a few minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Not yet. I felt clear, like something had finally clicked. I picked up my phone, scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in months, stared at the name for a second. Then I pressed call. The voice on the other end picked up on the second ring. "Eric? Wow. It's been a while." "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "I think it's time we talked about that offer." And just like that, everything changed. But they wouldn't find out until it was too late. I didn't tell anyone what the call was about. Not Dad. Not Mom. Not even my few close friends. It wasn't out of spite or drama. I just needed it to be mine. For once. Something that wasn't inspected, compared, or casually dismissed. The man I called, his name's Raj, was an old college friend. Brilliant guy. Always a few steps ahead of everyone else, and not just in tech. We had talked 6 months ago, briefly, after he launched a new startup focused on secure AI-integrated backend tools for government contracts. I'd helped him on a few freelance gigs before, but nothing permanent. At the time, he'd made an offer, full-time role, senior dev, remote-friendly, with a stake. I told him I wasn't ready back then. But now I was more than ready. I didn't tell him about the dinner, or my dad's toast, or how I paid for a cake I didn't eat while being the punchline at my mom's birthday. I didn't need to. He just said, "I had a feeling you'd call," and we spent the next hour talking about specs, onboarding, and the kind of infrastructure he wanted me to lead. It felt like someone finally saw me for more than what I wasn't. By the end of the week, I'd signed. And it wasn't just a job. It was a way out. The funny thing is, once you know you're done trying to win someone's approval, the mask slips easier. I still saw my family in the weeks that followed, but I stopped making myself small. When Jason bragged about his sales numbers, I didn't fake interest. When Dad joked about how some people settle for safe careers, I didn't laugh. I just said, "It's not about flash. It's about freedom." He blinked, like I'd spoken another language. Mom gave me that warning look, the one that begged me not to rock the boat, but I let the silence hang anyway. And it wasn't just dinners. Jason came to me one afternoon, a month later, all buddy-buddy energy and crocodile charm. Said he was thinking about getting into the tech space. Asked if I could connect him with Raj, just for a coffee chat, he insisted. Nothing serious. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't. I wasn't about to hand over the one thing in my life that was finally mine, not when he was already knee-deep in leased cars and empty business cards. But this wasn't even the breaking point. That came in March, 3 months after Mom's birthday. It was a Sunday. Overcast, quiet, and I was in the middle of a deep refactor of a legacy system when Mom called. "Hey, sweetheart," she said. "We're having a little family cookout this afternoon. Jason's bringing that new brisket recipe he learned." I glanced at the clock. It was already noon. "Today?" I asked. "You're just now inviting me?" "Oh, we figured you were probably busy. You always are with those computer projects." I stared at my screen. Line after line of code. I could have lied. Said I had a deadline. But something in her voice, the dismissive familiarity of it, twisted in my chest. "You already invited Jason, though?" "Well, yes, but that's different. He has to rearrange a lot to be here." I wanted to ask her what she thought I rearranged every time I drove across town for dinners where I barely spoke. But I didn't. I just said, sure, I'll come by. When I arrived, it was like walking into a movie set already in motion. Jason's car, now a Tesla, was front and center. Music was playing. Kids, his girlfriend's nephews, apparently, were running around. People I didn't recognize were chatting in the backyard like they lived there. I spotted Jason at the grill, spatula in hand, wearing an apron that said Grill King. Of course. Eric, he called out. You made it. I forced a smile. Hey. He handed me a beer like we were frat brothers and clapped me on the back. Dad's inside. He's gonna love this brisket. I made my way into the house, already regretting showing up. Mom greeted me with a distracted kiss on the cheek. Oh good, you're here. Can you help Jason with the side dishes? Sure, I said. But the real punch didn't come until after dinner. We were all sitting outside, plates balanced on laps, when Dad stood again, this time holding a can of beer instead of a wine glass. I just want to say, he began, and I tensed, how proud I am to see our family growing. Jason's been killing it this year. 2 new sales offices, a podcast interview, and now, he beamed, he's officially making more in a month than I did in my best year. Applause. Laughter. A few guests even whistled. Jason grinned, humble brag mode engaged. Couldn't have done it without the support of the best family ever. And then Dad, drunk off pride, turned toward me and said, and Eric, buddy, thanks for fixing the Wi-Fi last week. There was a beat of silence. Then someone, I think Jason's girlfriend, giggled. That was it. My contribution to the family. Fixing the Wi-Fi. I didn't say anything. Didn't make a scene. I just stood, set my plate down, and said I had a migraine. Mom barely looked up. Oh no, feel better, sweetheart. No one stopped me. Not even Jason, who was too busy basking in the glow of his applause. I got in my car, drove halfway home, then pulled over at a park and sat on a bench, staring at the lake. I wanted to cry. Not because I was hurt. Not exactly. But because I was finally done pretending it didn't hurt. And that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to just detach. I wasn't going to go quietly and live a parallel life while they cheered for someone else. I was going to show them exactly what I'd built. Not to earn their applause, but to make sure they could never laugh at me again. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. In April, Raj asked if I'd consider flying out to San Diego for a summit. He wanted me to demo one of the internal systems I'd quietly built, something that was already catching attention from 2 major clients. It was a big deal. We were talking 7-figure contracts. Real stakes. I agreed. Spent weeks polishing my deck, refining every detail. When I walked into that summit, I wasn't Eric the forgotten son. I was Eric Morgan, lead solutions architect for a startup poised to break into federal tech contracts. And when the pitch closed with applause and handshakes and 2 execs asking if we were open to acquisition discussions, I didn't smile because of the money. I smiled because I knew exactly what I was going to do next. You see, Jason had just announced, loudly and proudly, that he was starting a family newsletter. Some cheesy email chain meant to keep us all in the loop. He'd even roped Mom and Dad into it, promising updates, photos, and little spotlights on family milestones. I waited until the 2nd issue. Jason opened it with his usual flair. Jason's Journal, Edition 2, followed by a list of his Q2 sales numbers, a picture of his new car, and a paragraph about the grind never stopping. He ended it by asking if anyone else had big news to share. So I replied. All I said was, hey, figured I'd drop a quick update too. Just closed a multi-million-dollar deal for our platform and got bumped to equity partner. We're likely expanding to 3 more countries by fall. Hope you're all well. I didn't attach photos. Didn't drop links. Just a quiet line in the middle of the noise. Jason didn't reply. Mom responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Dad said nothing. But something shifted after that. The next dinner? Jason wasn't quite as loud. Dad wasn't quite as smug. And Mom, she actually asked me what equity partner meant. And then came the moment that sealed everything. You'd think the big win, the deal, the promotion, the quiet flex in Jason's inbox, would have felt like the turning point. And for a brief moment, it did. I walked a little taller. My voice didn't crack when I spoke at family dinners. I stopped trying to be invisible. I even noticed Dad pausing once, just for a second, before making another snide remark about real jobs. He still said it, but that pause? It meant something. Like he wasn't as sure anymore. Like I was no longer the punchline. But that illusion shattered barely a month later. It started innocently enough. Raj called to say we'd been invited to present our platform at a private tech demo for a government innovation board. It wasn't just a conference or a deal. This was the kind of thing that could put our company on the map. Quiet rooms, big checks, policy influence. The kind of thing that changes not just a company, but lives. Naturally, I told Mom. We were on the phone. She was telling me about some brunch Jason was throwing, apparently now with a catered mimosa bar. And I thought, for once, I'd interrupt her mid-brag. Hey Mom, I've got something cool too. Raj and I are pitching to the federal board next month. It's invite only. Could change everything. There was a pause. Just 2 seconds. Then she said, "Oh, that's nice, sweetheart. So you'll be traveling again?" That was it. No curiosity. No, tell me more. No pride. Just shifting back to her own script. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah, big opportunity. Well, I hope you have time to come to Jason's brunch the weekend before. He's renting a rooftop downtown. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just nodded and said I'd try. Spoiler, I didn't go. Instead, I focused. I put every waking hour into the presentation, polished it like glass, rehearsed until my voice was hoarse. And when the day came, I nailed it. Every question, every technical challenge, every concern, I handled them. Raj texted me an hour later. You just bought our future. But 2 days later, everything crashed. Literally. A backend exploit, one of our test systems, was breached. It wasn't fatal, but it was embarrassing. Our code wasn't the issue, but the optics were bad. The board delayed their decision. Our team was thrown into emergency audit mode. Raj, for the first time ever, sounded shaken on a call. We're fine, he kept saying. We'll fix it. But we've got to brace. For the next 3 weeks, I barely slept. I ran on coffee and code. My personal life vanished. I missed texts, calls, even my rent payment. I didn't care. I was in fight mode. And in the middle of all that, my family decided to host a family appreciation dinner. I swear I'm not making that up. It was Jason's idea. He texted the whole family group chat. Let's celebrate Mom and Dad for being our rock. Dinner at their place next Sunday. No excuses. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I was knee-deep in stress, trying to salvage my career. But 3 days before the dinner, I got a voicemail from Dad. Calm voice. That fake calm he uses when he's trying not to sound petty. Eric, I know you're busy, but you need to make time for your family. You think we don't see you working? We do. But family comes first. Always. Don't make your brother look like the only grateful one. I stared at my phone like it had grown horns. Don't make your brother look like the only grateful one. He wasn't helping me stay up until 4 a.m. fixing security patches. He wasn't making contingency decks for the board. He wasn't the one watching something he'd spent years building suddenly wobble on a national stage. But sure, Jason's catered rooftop brunch? That's gratitude. Still, I went. Because deep down, I still had this tiny flicker of hope. That maybe they'd ask how I was. Maybe someone would notice the bags under my eyes or the way my hands were trembling from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. I showed up late, wore a wrinkled shirt, unshaven, exhausted. Mom opened the door and blinked. Oh, honey, you look tired. That was it. I nodded and stepped inside. The dinner was already in full swing. Jason was playing some acoustic cover on a Bluetooth speaker. People were laughing. There were candles. A banner that said, "To the best parents ever," hung across the living room like it was a Hallmark movie set. And Jason? He was in rare form. "Glad you made it, bro," he said, handing me a drink I didn't ask for. We were just about to give speeches. Speeches. I should have left right then. But I didn't. I sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, trying not to fall asleep. Jason started with a speech about how Mom and Dad taught him the value of hard work and ambition. He thanked them for never doubting his vision. Mom teared up. Dad looked like he'd won the lottery. Then he turned to me. And of course, Jason said, "We've got to thank Eric for always being around. Quiet support, you know? Every team needs someone like that." There was light laughter. Light. Like I was a flashlight or a houseplant. "Thanks for fixing the TV last week too, man. Saved me from missing the game." More laughter. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because if I didn't smile, I'd scream. Dad clinked his glass. To Eric, our steady rock. That was it. That was their praise. That I existed. That I didn't implode. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Quietly. Like a thread snapping in a dark room. I stood. Said I wasn't feeling well. And walked out. No one followed me. Not even Mom. I got in my car and drove until I hit a rest stop. I sat there, in the dark, shaking, not with rage, but with exhaustion. I'd spent so long trying to prove I mattered, not to the world, but to them. And here I was, partner in a groundbreaking company, fighting to save something massive, and all they saw was the guy who kept the Wi-Fi running and didn't complain too loudly. That night, I turned off my phone, and the next morning, I started over. Not with the company. I was still working, harder than ever, actually, but I started over personally. I stopped trying to win, stopped trying to show up. I started saying no. Mom called the next week to ask if I could help Jason set up a digital calendar system for his new assistant. I said I was too busy. Dad emailed asking if I could review a proposal Jason was working on for an app. I didn't even open it. Jason texted me, "Yo, you good?" I didn't reply. For the first time, I stopped feeding the machine. And it changed me. I slept. Not much, but enough. I reconnected with an old friend from college, someone who actually asked about me. I started eating better. Went for walks. The company stabilized. Raj called to say the board was back in play. The breach had actually impressed them. We'd handled it with transparency and resilience. They like us even more now, he said. Crisis made us look mature. I smiled. Not because of the board, but because I felt it too. I was maturing, not into someone new, into someone I used to be before I was made small. I didn't need their applause, but I was about to get something better. Not revenge. Not yet. But power. And what I did with that? Well, that's where things started to get messy. I didn't plan revenge overnight. It wasn't like I stormed out of that dinner and immediately plotted some master takedown. At first, I just disengaged. Quietly. Casually. And if that had been enough, if they'd just let me drift away in peace, maybe none of this would have happened. But they didn't. Because people like my family, they don't notice you until they need you. And then, when you stop showing up the way they're used to, it's like you've broken some unspoken contract. Like they're entitled to your time, your energy, your silence. It started with small things. Jason called asking for help with a few lines of code for some startup pitch he was working on. Something about a property management app that would revolutionize landlord-tenant relations. I said no. Then Mom texted asking if I could help her reinstall some printer drivers. I ignored it. A week later, Dad left me a voicemail. "I don't know what's going on with you, Eric, but you're still part of this family. Don't forget that." The irony, of course, was that I'd never really been part of the family. I'd been a prop, a convenience, the background guy who made things work but never made things difficult. And I was finally done playing that role. But I wasn't just disappearing. I was preparing. A few days after Raj confirmed the federal board was back on, we had a call with one of the investors, a quiet guy named Thomas who didn't talk much in meetings, but always asked smart questions when it counted. He requested a secondary meeting. Just me and him. I didn't know what to expect, but I went. Turns out, Thomas wasn't just an investor. He was a connector. Your system, he said, has government potential, sure. But it also has real estate applications, especially for high-value property portfolios. I blinked. Wait, like landlord-facing CRM tools. He nodded. Your brother's in real estate, right? That's when it clicked. Because Jason was in real estate. And sloppy about it. Always looking for shortcuts. Always jumping from one shiny idea to the next without bothering to understand the tech. I remembered last year when he tried launching a referral site and outsourced the whole thing to a guy in Bulgaria who ghosted him halfway through. So I leaned in and asked Thomas, would you be open to backing a side module, something customizable, for private brokers? He smiled. Pitch me. So I did. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. Again, but this time with a different fire. I created a shell system, a CRM integrated suite tailored for luxury agents, with AI-driven lead filtering, smart contract management, and instant property valuation overlays. Basically everything Jason pretended he offered, but real. Raj saw the mock-up and whistled. You're onto something. I want to keep it separate, I told him. Just a pilot. No brand. No splash. Quiet rollout. He nodded. You need something for yourself. He didn't ask why. He just said, let me know when you need dev support. The next phase was slower. Subtle. I began poking around Jason's digital footprint. His LinkedIn was full of fluff, growth strategist, visionary broker, networking disruptor. His Instagram was worse. But the real meat was in the companies he'd registered. I looked up the LLCs he posted about. 3 were inactive. 1 had been dissolved for tax delinquency. 1 was still active and hilariously underdeveloped. A half-baked website, a broken lead gen form, and a testimonials page that still had placeholder text. This is where your clients rave about your service. Classic Jason. So I bought the domain name he meant to get, 1 letter off from his brand, but cleaner, more professional, and SEO optimized. Then I registered a shell company, EquiSmart Solutions. Generic, safe, professional. I used it to host the new platform, the one that made Jason's system look like a GeoCities page. And then I waited. I didn't market it. I didn't tweet. I didn't run ads. I just made sure his clients could find it. I paid for a few targeted search ads with keywords like Premium CRM for Real Estate Agents, Property Automation Suite, and, here's the kicker, his business name. If you Google Jason's company, my platform popped up first. The click-through rate was insane. And after the first 2 brokers signed up for free trials, I turned on the paid tiers. Around that time, I started seeing shifts in Jason's posts. The usual swagger was still there, but now it was mixed with vague references to copycats and haters stealing ideas. He posted a story with a screenshot of my platform's homepage, blurred, but I recognized the layout, with the caption, "Funny how some people can't build their own thing." I smiled, because he had no clue it was me. But he would. Eventually. The next step was personal. I started seeing Mom again, but on my terms. Coffee shops, quiet lunches. And during one of those lunches, she let something slip. "You know, your brother's been struggling lately." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She stirred her tea. "Something about clients pulling out. He's very stressed, snapping at everyone." I sipped my drink. "That doesn't sound like Jason." She smiled sadly. "It does, actually." And then she said something I didn't expect. "I wish he were more like you." I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd longed to hear those words, or any version of them. But now that I had, they rang hollow. Too late. Too easy. I nodded. "Thanks." She reached across the table. "I just hope you two can make peace. You're both so talented. If only you worked together." I almost laughed. That'll never happen. But that gave me an idea. Jason had been pitching to a small luxury development group, trying to land a major listing deal for a waterfront property in Orange County. He'd been bragging about it in every family text thread for weeks. I knew the group, and I knew someone who knew them. So I made a call, not to sabotage, to compete. I demoed EquiSmart for them, not as a broker, but as a solution provider. I showed them analytics Jason couldn't dream of, automated systems, predictive buyer modeling, integration with financial institutions for real-time qualification. They were impressed, not by flash, by function. They dropped him within a week. He didn't know why, but his meltdown was spectacular. He posted a rant on Instagram about snake behavior and losers who piggyback off real talent. His captions got darker, more bitter. He even made a TikTok about how hard it is to build something when your own family doesn't support you. I watched it all in silence. And then, the final piece fell into place. Mom invited me to a dinner. Not a holiday, not a birthday, just dinner. At their house. She said, "It would mean a lot if you came. Your dad misses you." I almost said no, but then I realized this was the perfect opportunity to end the show, or rather, start it. Because what I was about to reveal, it wouldn't just shatter the family dynamic. It would burn the script they'd written for me, the one where I was always the quiet one, the helper, the afterthought. No more. And they had no idea what was coming. It was a warm Sunday evening when I pulled into my parents' driveway, half expecting to feel that old familiar tightness in my chest. But for the first time in years, I didn't. I wasn't there to prove anything. I wasn't there to win affection or beg for recognition. I was there to close a chapter. Their porch light was already on, even though the sun hadn't set. The whole house was lit up like a celebration, which wasn't surprising. My mom always went all out when she hosted. Polished silverware, matching napkins, jazz playing softly in the background. But the vibe this time was different, more tense, as if they knew something was off, even if they couldn't quite name it yet. I stepped inside. Jason was already there, sitting at the dining table, tapping away on his phone, jaw tight, eyes shadowed with stress. Mom gave me a soft smile and opened her arms for a hug. Dad gave me the usual one pat on the back version, like we were co-workers at a retirement party. We sat down. Dinner was already plated, Mom's rosemary chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. The kind of meal that was supposed to bring people together. But this time, I came with an appetite for something else. So, Mom began gently, folding her hands on the table like she was moderating a therapy session. I wanted us to all be here tonight. Things have been tense. Jason scoffed quietly. Didn't look up from his phone. Dad cleared his throat. Yeah, it feels like you two have been at odds for months now. We're not trying to pick sides, but there are no sides, I said calmly. There's just truth. And there's habit. Jason finally looked up. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've spent years playing the role you all gave me, I said, keeping my voice steady. The quiet one. The fixer. The guy who helps behind the scenes while everyone else gets the spotlight. Jason rolled his eyes. Oh God, here we go? The martyr speech. I ignored him. But here's the thing. I'm not angry about it anymore. I understand why it happened. You need someone to play the contrast. You shine brighter when I stay dim. That got under his skin. His nostrils flared. That's crap and you know it. No, I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out my tablet. But this is not crap. I tapped the screen, waking it up, and slid it across the table. It showed the EquiSmart dashboard, live client metrics, conversion rates, CRM overlays, demo video thumbnails. And at the bottom, in the footer, my name. Eric Morgan, founder. Jason's eyes widened. He didn't speak, but I could see the blood draining from his face. Dad furrowed his brow. What is this? I looked at him. It's the platform your other son has spent the last 6 months quietly building. The one that's replacing your Golden Boy's outdated system. The one his clients are switching to because it actually works. Jason pushed his chair back abruptly, nearly knocking it over. You're the one behind EquiSmart. Yep. You stole my clients. His voice cracked, part rage, part panic. I tilted my head. I didn't steal anyone. They came to me. I just offered them something better. He stood, fists clenched. This is low even for you. I stayed seated. No, Jason. Lo was laughing when Dad made that toast about me staying exactly where I belong. Lo was turning every dinner into a seminar about your sales stats while treating me like tech support. Lo was pretending I wasn't worth listening to unless I was fixing something for you. He looked to Dad for backup. But Dad just stared at the screen, mouth slightly open. I gave you every chance to treat me like an equal. I continued. I came to dinners. I paid the bill. I showed up. But none of it mattered. Because you weren't looking at me. You were looking through me. Mom was frozen. Her eyes were glassy. Sweetheart, why didn't you say something? I did. For years. Just not loud enough for you to hear. Jason paced at the end of the table, shaking his head. This is war. You really think this is going to make you the favorite? You think sabotaging me makes you better? I don't want to be the favorite, I said. I want to be free. And that was the truth. That's what they didn't get. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. I came tonight, I said, standing, not to gloat, not to destroy anyone, but to draw a line. I looked at my parents. I'm done playing support character in a story I didn't write. I'm building my own world now. And you're welcome in it, but only if you respect me as I am. No more comparisons. No more dismissals. No more last-minute calls to fix your printer because Jason's too busy posting on Instagram. Jason sneered. You're pathetic. I smiled. Then stop losing clients to me. He didn't have a comeback. Mom stood, still wringing her napkin. I didn't know you were hurting so much. I know. I wish I'd seen it sooner. I nodded. I wish you had too. Dad finally broke his silence. So what now? You just walk away from us. I looked at him, steady. No. I walk towards something better. And if you want to be a part of it, really be a part of it, then meet me there. But I'm not dragging you anymore. And with that, I picked up my tablet, slid it back into my bag, and walked toward the door. I paused on the threshold. By the way, I added without turning around, your internet's been acting up because your modem's outdated. You'll need to replace it. And this time, figure it out yourselves. I walked out to the sound of silence. No one followed. No one called my name. And as I got in my car and started the engine, I felt something strange. Light. Lighter than I'd felt in years. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread quietly. Jason lost 2 more clients. Rumor was, one of them found out his testimonials page was fake and told others. He started posting less. His influencer girlfriend unfollowed him and posted a solo Reset Era announcement. Ouch. Mom called twice. Left long, emotional voicemails. I listened to them both. Didn't call back right away. I wanted space. Not out of cruelty, but because healing needs silence, too. Dad emailed me. A real email. It was short. No punctuation. Just, I was wrong. You did good. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. And me? EquiSmart expanded. Thomas introduced me to 3 more investors. Raj and I signed a federal pilot in August. We hired 5 engineers. We built something real. Something that didn't need to be flashy to be respected. I still think about that toast sometimes. The one where Dad said, "Let's thank your brother for becoming someone, and you for staying exactly where you belong." Turns out, where I belonged was at the head of my own table, and I'm never giving up that seat again.